Welcome everyone to the council meeting, committee of the whole meeting slated for Tuesday, March 1st. Before we officially adopt today's agenda, I just want to make just a statement. I'm not asking for any response, and that is a couple of, we have a full house. A couple of the people in the house today have asked for everybody having the courtesy to wear your mask unless you're up here speaking so that everybody can hear us clearly. Unless you're compromised in some way, that's fine. But other than that, we would appreciate it if you would simply wear your mask and everybody can move along in the positive direction that we would like to see this meeting move forward. So, having said that, I will say that we are holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Cohaman First Nation, our friends and community partners, and I am going to call for the adoption of today's agenda as printed unless I hear otherwise. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Mayor Formosa. Any concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, unanimous. And we have Councillor Leishman on the screen, piping in to help us with our spacing in the chamber. So, we've moved today's agenda. We would like to next adopt the minutes of the regular committee of the whole meeting held February 15th, 2022. Moved by Councillor Dowd, seconded by Councillor Hathaway. Any current concerns, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Now we move to delegations, and we have 3.1, Michelle Riddle, regarding removing, Ms. Riddle, welcome. Yep. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, before the speaker speaks, can I make
Yes, Your Worship, go right ahead.
I would like to offer my family's condolence to your team of community members and citizens in the loss of a very nice young man, Wade Samet.
Thank you.
Okay. Pass it along, please.
It's appreciated. Okay, so the great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest.
Just sorry, Michelle, I've got to clarify one thing for council. Today I was informed that you put a request in for the length of time of your presentation.
Yep.
You know our standard time is 10 minutes.
That's right.
And were you going to ask for an extension to that?
I was going to ask for an extension of that if you wanted to go through the material that I've submitted already for you. So you've got that material to review. So if you'd like to have that at the end, I would love to talk through that with anybody who would like to do that.
So we have a very lengthy agenda today. So what I'm going to do is limit to you to the 10 minutes, because what I did earlier today when I was informed of this by our clerk in City Hall was I asked her to send it to all council members. Yep. And please give them the message to have their reading and viewing of your presentation done so that we don't have to lengthen your presentation.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to go through the material that I've provided. Okay, so the great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and seemingly real. I've provided you with significant evidence-based data that confirms that the statement that COVID vaccines are safe and effective is a myth. I've provided you with significant evidence-based data that confirms that the statement that COVID-19 mandates, so masking, social distancing, the use of vax passports for activities, are reducing COVID, these mandates are reducing COVID cases and deaths is also a myth. While all other provinces in Canada are removing their COVID-related mandates, British Columbia seems to be taking a tougher stance, particularly towards regulated healthcare workers. In February, the provincial health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, announced that all regulated healthcare workers in BC must be vaccinated before March 24th, 2022, to continue to have the right to practice, earn a living, and provide vital services to the public. Such mythical measures infringe on the rights and freedoms of all Canadians, and I've just given you our rights and freedoms for you to review. So such mythical measures infringe on the rights and freedoms of all Canadians, especially at a time when there are insufficient healthcare workers to meet public need. This discriminatory and short-sighted mandate will cause serious stress and unnecessary financial hardship to many British Columbia families. According to the provincial health minister, there are over 4,000 unvaccinated healthcare workers who are now facing job loss, while many patients face abandonment of care, which will have significant trickle-down effects, causing greater strain on otherwise overwhelmed medical system. In a ridiculous attempt to mitigate this systemic overwhelm, and I want you to really listen to this statement, hospitals are now encouraging fully vaxxed but COVID-positive healthcare providers to come to work with symptoms while they've terminated and are disrupting any future capacity to work for healthy, COVID-negative, symptom-free healthcare professionals. Think about that for a moment in terms of a mythical and ridiculous context. If it's about the symptoms, why are they encouraging people who have symptoms and positive tests to come to work? I'm really hoping that somebody can explain how that science makes sense. Anybody? No? Okay. Just a thought. The recovery rate for COVID-19 is 99.97%. There are proven and inexpensive treatments available. These shots are experimental, and when something's experimental, it means that you have to fill out multiple forms in order to participate with the experiment. You need to agree that you know this is an experiment. You need to say, I am taking part in this experiment, understanding that there are risks associated with it, and we don't know the long-term outcomes. You need to be able to walk away from that experiment at any point in time. We have the Nuremberg codes to support this. In World War II, there were huge numbers of experiments that were done on human beings. We put in the Nuremberg Code to prevent this from happening. This has now happened worldwide, okay? So these are experimental, and the data that's being revealed, which is what happens in an experiment, tells us that these shots, the COVID-19 shots, do not protect anyone from the virus. They are neither safe nor effective. As of yesterday, 9 out of 10, this is in British Columbia, 9 out of 10 COVID cases and 7 out of 10 COVID deaths available in BC were in vaccinated individuals. So this is the data available publicly as of yesterday. Okay? Mainstream media has perpetuated a myth that at the very least is lining the pockets of JT, who has financial interests in Acuitas and receives financial incentive with every shot he promotes. This is called racketeering. That is illegal, and it is a crime. And it's being performed by the Prime Minister of this country. Think about that for a minute. Why would you not be into mandating vaccinations if it gave you money every time one of those shots went into a human being? Why would you not dispute the effectiveness of preventive measures if you could profit substantially from every single shot. And this is data that's available publicly. Information and data have been blatantly censored. And a good example is the removal of the interview by Dr. Charles Hoff that I sent to you last week. I received a notice that was not available. You couldn't get into it. I went looking for it. It's been removed. This is normal right now. Science is being attempted to be brought forward. Information is being attempted to be brought forward. This information is being actively removed. There's a bill, Bill C-11, that is looking at data censorship. That's going to be brought forward within our country over the next few months. It's important that we recognize what this is about and what that means. If we don't say exactly what the government tells us to say, if we don't follow exactly what they're telling us, we're going to be in big trouble. Think about that as a democratic country. Okay, many continue to risk everything, their careers, their income potential, their reputations, family relationships, to provide the data that can wake people up. Information that can save lives. They're not doing this for kicks. They're not doing this for financial benefit. They're doing this because they care about humanity and because they are willing to stand up and say this is wrong, say that you need to look at the other data, say that something else needs to be done than what we're doing, because what we're doing is not working. And we have the evidence to support that statement now. Those who have received this information and have actively chosen to ignore the outcry to step up against these illegal activities will find themselves culpable for crimes against humanity. They will find themselves culpable. That's not a position I would want to be in. You have the information. Anybody who has the information needs to think about that information and what it means. I talked with a gentleman last night who was in Ottawa, and he was standing in the line of the peaceful protesters. As the RCMP were wearing their battle gear, and they had batons, and they had pepper spray, and they were pushing into the crowds, and they were banging on the crowds. And the peaceful protesters stood there, and what they said was freedom. What they did was look in the eyes of the officers that were across from them and say, shame on you. And what this gentleman told me last night is that in that lineup across from them, two of the officers took off their gear, put it down on the ground, and joined the peaceful line. That's happening all over our country. People are standing up to say our government is not doing the right things. Last week I had my bank accounts frozen for investigation into possible contributions to a terrorist regime. Yes, I donated to the mission of the bouncy castle. And you know what? Some of the terrorists that are there are about this tall. They wear bows on their head, they wear little flags. It's a family event. It's a peaceful protest. It is not a terrorist regime. I have been classified as a racist, a misogynist, a terrorist with unacceptable views by our Prime Minister. That is inciting hate. I have stood with a flag that says love over fear, a Canadian flag. It says love over fear. And people have come up to me and screamed in my face, you should die. Love over fear? What is that? Why should I die for saying we need love over fear? How does that compute? What is that? These responses to peaceful protests and the sharing of valid scientific data are criminal. I forwarded you a link to the official government data, which reveals that there are twice as many deaths following COVID-19 vaccination in 1 year as deaths following all vaccines in the previous 30 years. That's an issue. I'll read it again. Official government data reveals that there are twice as many deaths following COVID-19 vaccines in 1 year as deaths following all vaccines for the previous 30 years. have in your possession evidence,
I'm just going to give you a 2-minute warning, okay?
yep, that demonstrates that none of the current public health mandates are helpful to reduce the impact of COVID-19. All other Canadian provinces and many countries around the world have removed all mandates. In a recent Ottawa court ruling, the judge wondered why we should be reluctant to take judicial notice that the government isn't always right. We're participating in an open book exam, and many exceptionally skilled doctors express that if, by now, we're not actively part of the dissolution of this public health myth and these crimes against humanity, we are, by our compliance, perpetuating them. So in history, for decades, the government assured us that taking Indigenous children away and being willfully blind to their abuse was the right thing to do. How about sterilization of Inuit women? Same thing. Japanese, Chinese internment camps during World War II? How about thalidomide? The doctor who suggested that thalidomide was possibly used for sickness in pregnancy, then retracted that. He said, no, there's dangers. And he said this before it was released to the world. His license to practice was taken away, and he was considered a quack. Guess what? Thousands and thousands of kids around the world were born with their hands coming out of their shoulders. People were told that this would happen. It was already in the works. Money. Okay? When government serially pays out billions of dollars to apologize for unthinkable historical violations of human rights and security, how can we possibly presume that today's government experts are infallible? Nobody is infallible, and nobody who controls other people's lives, especially children's lives, should be beyond scrutiny or impervious to review. Today, I again call on the municipal government of Powell River to do the right thing, to thoroughly scrutinize the actions of our provincial government, review all evidence with an open mind, and to review harmful mandates within our community so we can move forward in a sovereign, unified, and healthy capacity. I also call on you to remain vigilant, because in the next few months, we're likely to be hit by a much more nefarious pandemic of a virus propagated by the government that has suspiciously similar symptoms to the hemorrhagic injuries and deaths associated with COVID-19 vaccines. We have information that another shot for this new virus has already been developed before the virus has even been identified. You don't have to believe me about that now, but when the next pandemic hits, and I pray to God that I am wrong, you will not be afraid, and you will be able to see beyond the propaganda to stop the crimes before they happen. We have missed the boat with COVID-19. Many people, especially children, have or will die and suffer lifelong injuries like infertility because of our blindness.
Michelle?
We all need to
Sorry, your
wake
time
up.
is up.
2 sentences. We all need to wake up and look at the historical cheat sheet that lies open in front of us. Together, starting with the removal of the existing mandates in our community, we can and must protect our people from the tyrannical outreach of our federal and provincial governments. We can do this together, and I call on all of you to stand up as we should.
Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Council, do you have any questions? Councillor Elliott. Mayor Formosa, second.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Michelle Riddle. I know you're not a terrorist. I know you work with children.
Yeah.
And I commend you on your bravery and your persistence and your passion. I think you know that we're not a sovereign government, and that we don't have jurisdiction on much of what you're speaking. I know there are some court cases going, in which I'll be following, interestingly enough, to find out how the justifications are made and whether they stand up to court scrutiny. And I agree that a review process is probably best for things like this. Thank you.
Thank you. That's important for the review. And we also need to remember that, again, we are the last province, and many other countries in the world have already removed these mandates because of exactly what I've said. So as a local community, and local communities have done this, mandates have been lifted.
Thank you. Thank
The-
you, Councillor Elliott. Mayor Formosa.
Thank you. I just ditto to what was said by Councillor Elliott, and I look with great interest to the courts over the next 5 years. Thank you.
Okay, this needs to happen now, not 5 years from now. So for our local community, we need to think about that. One more thing,
sorry.
there are antigen tests that have just been distributed to our kids.
All right.
Yeah.
Mayor Formosa, thank you for those comments. Councillor Southcott, you're on the speaking agenda.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question. It isn't a question of you particularly. I think it's a question for all of us, every single one of us. And this was after a whole lot of thinking. Well, I've been thinking about this for 2 years, actually. I do have a science background, and I've seen a pile of inconsistencies. The question is this: are we smart enough to get past being divided in this community? Because there is one thing, I think, that will allow all of us individually and collectively in community to see our way through very confusing times now, and probably more confusing, I don't doubt at all, your inference that there's there's more entertainment coming. This means getting past fear, and there's one way that I can see, and that is that we keep asking questions. We keep asking questions. And we keep listening, all of us. And I really hope that there are people in this group out here who are not supporters of you, because I'm really hoping that all of us in this community can keep asking questions and keep listening. Yes. Because I don't think any of us, so there's an awful lot of speculation. I'm skeptic. This didn't start with science. This started with public policy that was based on assumptions that were needed to be made before the science was really available. But it's been 2 years now, and we do have science is possible. However, that being said, there's a huge opportunity for confusion, way more opportunity for confusion, and the confusion divides us as well, just like fear does. So I come back to the one question I have: are we smart enough to see our way through this? And my only answer to that question is by listening to each other and by staying open-minded and keeping our hearts open. So I really hope that this is what I've known this to characterize my community here, and I really hope that we can continue along this road, listening, asking questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Southcott. Much appreciated. Mayor Formosa.
Yeah, so to close this off, I've got to leave us with this thought. My sister-in-law, who is head nurse in ICU in the Lower Mainland, works where I'm tubing these people. And she wouldn't lie to me. She's retiring. This is her last shift, and she's retiring after spending her life nursing. And she had told me unequivocally that, and I don't know all the answers to this stuff, I'm as confused as many people, that folks that have the vaccine fare better than those that don't in her ICU. And I don't think she would lie to me. So I struggle with that. But I also struggle with a lot of other things that's going on where, you wonder if you are in Canada. But I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's important to look at all the data, right? It's important to look at all the data. I just need to say one quick thing. This last week, rapid antigen tests were given to our children in the school district, and I have the public advisory and hazardous substance statements for that. The short of this is that they may cause damage to organs through prolonged or repeated exposure. They are fatal if swallowed, in contact with skin, or if inhaled. Given to our kids. So we're about to go up and report a crime to our RCMP. This is part of the whole process. Why are these being given to our kids?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat what was given to our kids?
Rapid antigen test kits.
Are you sure they were distributed?
Yes, they were.
Councillor Elliott?
My child had one in his backpack. I took it away.
Yes, thank you. Yay, good on you. Yeah,
Appreciate sharing that information. I
it's
wasn't aware.
important information that we all need to think about as part of this whole process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for being here.
Chair, suggest a 2-minute recess.
Go right ahead, Mr. Jackson.
Just suggesting a 2-minute recess so the next delegation has a chance to set up.
Sure, we'll take a 2-minute recess. Thank you, everyone. We are going to come back from recess and restart our meeting. And we move to item 3.2, Mrs. Lisa Moffat, regarding community conversation. Proposed name change. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Councillor Palm, and nice to be here with everyone. My name is Lisa. Oh, you can't hear me if I have this on? Okay. My name is Lisa Moffat, and I was born and raised in Beothuk and Anishinaabe territory, so what we know as St. John's, Newfoundland, and Ottawa, Ontario. Spent most of my adult life in Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory, and moved to this beautiful territory of the Tla'amin Treaty Nation at the city of Pell River about 15 months ago, after falling in love with this place about 8 years ago. And I am one of the 2 consultants who's co-facilitating the public conversation for the Quequechtum community conversation possible name change. I'll turn it over to Trina to lead you through some of our slides today.
Hi, everyone. As Lisa said, my name is Trina Isaacson. I grew up in Secwepemc territory, Salmon Arm, very similar in size and scope to Pell River, so it definitely felt like home to me when I moved here 4.5 years ago. And I'm the other consultant that's been hired to work with the joint working group of the possible name change joint working group of the nation and the city. And the first word, as Lisa mentioned, Quequechtum means let's talk, community conversation, possible name change. And we're just here to update council on what's going on. You may have seen some of the materials start to come out today. Today we're officially launching the public engagement process for the joint working group. The project objectives come from the statement of work that we were hired to do, but also from the terms of reference. They are built on the terms of reference of the joint working group. And they are many-fold, but generally they are meant to, our work is meant to communicate with residents why considering a name change is important for our shared commitment to reconciliation that's shared among both the nation and the city. to foster positive conversation between residents about the values we share in a way that builds unity and pride. And so in this process, we're really inviting people to be curious and kind. Some people may have their minds made up, and some people may be more open to conversation, and we want to encourage that through this process. Another objective is to develop a shared understanding among residents about the harms and negative effects of colonialism, past and present. And so as part of this work, we're sharing some information about Israel Powell and the impacts of his role as a senior government official and the impacts today among Tla'amin people and Indigenous people more broadly in Canada. To deepen understanding, commitment, and pride among residents about truth, justice, and reconciliation in action, and to develop greater community consensus and understanding about the role of place naming in building a more welcoming and inclusive community. So our role is to facilitate public engagement, prepare with the Joint Working Group a report, and the Joint Working Group will submit recommendations to Council, at which point Council will likely consider public input, relations with the nation, and come to some sort of decision on how to move forward on a possible name change. But we're just very early in this process. So there's a timeline up on the screen. I'll zoom in a little bit. Back in November, the Joint Working Group members were appointed and they had their first meeting. In December, they met again to start building out a scope of work for consultants to help them to do public engagement. We were hired and brought on early mid-January, and we've been working on what we'll be doing for public engagement. So starting today and between March, April, and May, we are going to be doing both information sharing and soliciting input via survey, and then from that information deciding what sort of communication or what sort of conversations residents want to be in conversation about. And it'll kind of be an iterative process. We will learn, we will plan and engage, and then we'll learn some more and share more information. So it'll be moving back and forth between information sharing and public engagement. And currently, this is an emergent process. Currently, the plan is to report out on what we heard in June and sharing recommendations to Council in July. But this is a very emergent process. We don't know exactly all the steps that we'll be taking, but we know some of the steps that we'll be taking in the near future, and I'll pass it over to Lisa to share some of those upcoming things.
Thanks, Trina. So as Trina mentioned, the website launched today, and there's a lot of information on the website. Trina and I did review all of the correspondence received by Council up until, I think, the end of January to help develop the content for the website. So you'll see information about the project, the direction that Trina and I were given. There's content about who the members of the Joint Working Group are. There's some information about the public engagement process and a link to the survey that's open from now until March 25th. And then there's information about Israel Powell on there, and there's also a bunch of resources. So in the spirit of transparency, which is a very important guiding principle of the Joint Working Group, there's the terms of reference for the Joint Working Group, some more information about the truth and reconciliation calls to action, and other documents that people will find useful as part of this conversation. So in terms of immediate advertising, you'll see ads in an article in Cathette Living that comes out this week, ads in the Peak on March 2nd and 5th. We've also got a radio ad out going on Coast FM. A press release went out this morning, and there's been some uptake on that already. And through this week and the weekend, we'll be distributing posters and postcards throughout town to let people know that the project is up and running. It's got good uptake on social media. And before I left for the meeting, I checked what the survey responses were, and we're up to 230 responses. Yeah, so people are quite interested in engaging in this conversation. So as I said, the survey will run March 1st to 25th. The survey is available online, and we have hard copy surveys at available at City Hall, the library, and the recreation complex. People can also sign up for an email project list on the website. And we've got the public event listed there in mid-March, but we're going to bump it to the end of March to recognizing that March break is occurring, so to give people an opportunity to attend. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Council, questions? Mayor Formosa, you're up first.
Thank you, ladies, for your presentation here today. I want to apologize to council and the public personally for the long period of time that it took before we got here. I heard from, and I would tell this to the public, from my own council members giving me heck about where are we in this process, what's going on. We don't know. People are asking us. We can't tell them. And we had told them that we're still working through the process to set up a communication education process for the public. And, you know, and we're getting there. And so I'm happy to see us here today with the launch of the website. For those like my mother, who's 89, who does not have a computer, there are questionnaires and surveys throughout the community that will grow as time goes. Right now they're in, I think, just mostly city spots and the odd other facility in the community, and I think we'll see that grow as time goes on, where these surveys and questionnaires will get out there, you know, maybe in the mall and such. So, you know, I've been approached by many people, mostly ones that wanted to understand why we want to change the name, and I explained to them, because if you are a person from Common and when you hear Powell, certain members take that very personal because of the fact that residential schools and having their, when they were, you know, 5 years old, taken away from their home, crying, and they still remember it. And a few members of the public said, oh, that was hundreds of years ago. I said, no, those people are still alive today, and such. So it's the hurtfulness of my friends when they hear Powell about the fact that their culture, their language, their children were taken from them, and they feel that there's a lot of evidence that you know, blames this person that we celebrate. I have been, you know, pretty open that I don't have an issue with changing the name personally. I was born here. My 3 brothers were born here. My 4 children were born here. My 6 grandchildren are born here, and they're still here. I will be happy with what the public wants for, you know, in a name, if it's Powell River, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a First Nations name. We've been public about that. It's the Powell that hurts our friends. So again, I'm apologizing for the long time that it took us to, this was a difficult task to, you might think that it, you know, it's pretty simple, but, you know, it was asked of us at a C3 meeting. What is a C3 meeting? When Councillor Hathaway and Councillor Palm and myself got into government 14 years ago, we started meeting with the 3 governments on a regular basis. And we still do that today. Because there was always a lot of animosity between, and not saying that there isn't still, but we sit down and we talk about it and we bring up stuff, and this came out of that process. So thank you very much for hearing me out. And folks that contacted me that are against, they were happy to hear that there's a process where they can learn and they can communicate and be heard. And here it is finally to those people that I said would be coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I just want to clarify, the mayor has pointedly made the point time after time in this council of stating possible name change. I believe you have something you want to say.
Yeah, and just a clarification, maybe not for council, but for other members of the public who are listening, that this process is not meant to choose a name, like the actual potential name, if council moves forward with a process on name changing, is not part of this conversation. It's to be in conversation about a possible name change, and if there's no like list of names. It's not meant to be Powell River T-Squat. Choosing a new name is not part of this process. Right now, it's about being in conversation about the reasons why this request was made and the topics around that and determining public interest and support or lack thereof on a possible name change.
Thank you. And I'm just going to ask, oh, sorry, Councillor Elliott, you're next?
Oh, I didn't mean to supersede you.
No, not a problem at all.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for your worship's words. I also have been working on this joint committee. Things take a little bit of time when we're working on a government-to-government basis. It's not a couple of people that have asked us. It was a formal government of another community that made a formal ask of us. And so the conversation is important. I know there's a lot of love of community here. I have love of community. I love Powell River. I love the people in it. I have a lot of faith that the people will hear out what it is that we need to understand about this question, and we will come forward with, out of this process, some wonderful ideas about how we include our friends and neighbors, the Cohaman. And I'm looking forward to getting started, and I reiterate your worship's I don't know if it's a sorry or an apology, but I was hoping to get moving on this, and we are now, and I'm glad we're finally kicking it off, and I'm looking forward to getting out there and having that conversation so that the entire people can understand why this question is before us. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Elliott. And just, I want to clarify for the public, I think it's important. Both of you are here today. I think it's important for them to know, because I don't know this question, you were hired by the city and Cohaman, or what's your relationship with both parties?
This information is on the website as well. Both the city and the nation contributed money for the project, and so we're hired by the joint working group.
Okay.
Yeah, and our contract is actually with the nation.
Okay, so you were contracted with Cohaman, but we provided additional funding in order to...
We're hired by the joint working group, and the Cohaman Nation administers the contract on behalf of the joint working group that the city and the nation both contributed funds to.
Thank you very much for clarifying that for all of us.
Through the chair, are you happy with that answer, CAO? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here, and I'm very impressed with your mission. You're going to be gathering information and not advocating in one direction or another, and you're going to bring it back to this table for our information. So thank you very much, and we appreciate the fine work that you're going to be doing. Have a great day. So, having said that, we move to item 3.3, and we now have Mrs. Ellen Gould, Public Power for Powell River, regarding the future of energy production within the region. Welcome, Mrs. Gould.
My name is Ellen Gould. I live at 4477 Michigan Avenue. I'm here on behalf of a recently formed group, the Public Power for Powell River group. And as a personal aside, I'm quite happy to be here, delighted to be here on something that maybe we can all agree about, because you've probably seen me in other contexts in this room. So it's good to be here speaking to something really positive. Our group is founded to advocate for local public benefits from the generation of electricity in our area. We support the concept of energy democracy, the democratization of control over energy production, and having it contribute to social equity. You have received our written submission, perhaps in your agenda, containing a number of recommendations that we hope will spur council to take bold initiatives to realize these goals, and from what I read today, I think that process is underway. My personal knowledge of the electricity sector comes from working for a legal firm on a response to trade challenges against green energy subsidies. So I do know something about the electricity sector and its intricacies. It's a very complicated sector. When I recently heard that Powell River Energy, a company ultimately owned by Brookfield,
Just hang on 1
Have
second,
a
please.
pause.
a company ultimately owned by Brookfield with its headquarters in Bermuda, was applying to be exempt from regulation, I thought, well, what can their argument be for that? That just seemed like an outrageous kind of ask. So I read their submission, and there it was on page 2. I just brought it up to prove that they actually said this, saying that the BC Utility Commission shouldn't regulate Powell River Energy unless BCUC receives a complaint from a purchaser of power from PREI. Since their only plans as of today are to sell all the power they generate to the US, they're basically saying that BC shouldn't regulate them unless American customers are unhappy. So I'm glad you're laughing, Maggie, because it's like, are you kidding me? I mean, that's what pro-competitive deregulation looks like. With that statement, Brookfield is declaring that neither local communities nor BC residents in general should have any interest in how these dams are run or who they sell power to. We've certainly come a long way since the dams in our region created thousands of local jobs by powering the mill and providing free electricity to local residents, which they used to do to town site. These original public benefits have somehow got sloughed off over the years, but the fact remains that the profit Brookfield makes from the Powell River and Lois Lake dams and sends to its international shareholders is totally reliant on publicly owned land, resources, and transmission lines, some of which are subject to Clahaman Treaty rights. And as Clahaman has pointed out in its excellent submission to BCUC, they have a water license, the purpose of which is dependent on providing power to an industrial pulp mill. So that's their water license. They're not doing that anymore. So what's the basis for their water license? And so here are some photos of Powell River, the actual Powell River before the dam, and then the following ones are through the dam construction. So you can see it had a significant environmental impact. And that's Lois Lake before the Scanlon Dam was created, was built. More on Lois Lake. So, and those photos, by the way, are from the Powell River Museum. And in Clahaman's submission to BCUC, they speak to the damage that the dam caused. So they say that our ancestors were forced from our village, our river was dammed, the salmon habitat and nearshore marine resources were destroyed. And our other watersheds were also impacted because there's also Theodosia, of course, which you guys will know about, by diversion of rivers into the reservoir that came to be called Powell Lake. And there's pictures at the Museum of the Salmon that used to be in Powell River. The salmon run was so productive that you used to be able to walk on the backs of the salmon. In terms of Lois Lake, the dead floating or standing trees resulting from the dam operation there severely reduces its potential for recreational use. And I've heard people complain about the drift on that lake. The watersheds impacted by the two dams have a combined area of 1,230 square kilometers, with losses to fisheries, biodiversity, wildlife habitat, as well as to alternative economic development opportunities. With the closure of its mill and PREI's plan to sell all of its power to the US, Powell River is in the same situation as the people in the Kootenays were when dams were built on the Columbia River, enduring the negative impacts of hydro development, but none of the benefits. But with a lot of community organizing and courageous political leadership, their story had a happy ending. The Columbia Basin Accord was established in 1995, returning 50% of the profits from electricity sales to the Columbia Basin Trust. Last year, $71 million went from the trust back into the community. And so here are just some of the examples of the benefits that came from the trust. 820 new childcare spaces, $850,000 to support access to local food, a lot of affordable housing units for communities in that area, First Nations housing, student bursaries, wildfire risk reduction program, ecosystem enhancement. So you can see the kind of benefits that the Columbia Basin Trust provides to those communities, and a model that we could follow in Powell River that could return so much to our community. So public sector innovations such as the Columbia Basin Trust are an example of an economic development path that would have broad community support that everyone could get behind in these divisive times. To achieve this ambitious goal, Council will need the advice of an expert in public interest energy policy who can tell you what the possibilities are rather than merely cautioning you on the obstacles. We would strongly urge Council to engage such an expert as soon as possible so that the opportunities for public benefit can be seized at this critical time in Powell River's history. We would also ask for a public consultation process on the future of the dams and the mill lands, as broad public support will be critical for a prosperous, equitable, and environmentally sustainable future.
Thank you, Mrs. Gould. Appreciate the presentation. Mayor and council, questions? Mayor Formosa, followed by Councillor Dowd.
I don't know so much about questions, but I have some things to say in response to the excellent presentation. First and foremost, would start off with my condolence on behalf of the community for your husband. He was a proud Powell Riverite. We were proud to have him. He had a great career for Canada, BC, Powell River in his journalism work, and he was well respected. And on behalf of the community, sorry. Some issues that were brought up here today, I have a few things to mention and say and just give people things to think about. First thing I will address is the issue of joint ownership type trusts, as was we've had letters from community members about a trust similar to the ones, I don't know the name of it, I'm sorry, but whereby the idea would be some of the funds would go into a trust fund for the community to be used for certain beneficial activities. Earlier, if folks were in the room today, I talked about the C3. That's the 3 local governments where we meet, and I think I mentioned that here today. At that particular, at the last meeting, this issue was put on the agenda by one of the councillors. And I was the chair of that meeting, and where I ended up there was basically suggesting to the three communities the possibility of such a trust. What did we three think about that? And there was a little bit of chat about the information we received from citizens in regards to this thought. And then there was not a lot of response, like uptake in, debate or anything. I think it was just sort of, folks thinking about the comment. And after I pressed it a few times, then I left it with us all to think about at the table. The three governments that were represented there that day and their staff. And that the three CAOs meet and discuss this issue with their counterparts and report back after we've had a week or 2 or 3 to think about it, and that they would get together because apparently they have luncheons, these three folks. So, which is a good thing. It's good to be communicating. So that's my piece on that. As far as the Brookfields, my strong opinion is that we must insist through the process. If it, they've pulled out now partially the process and partially they're in. I'm still trying to understand it better. But they pulled out of one part and they've just stuck with the Canadian application or something. But anyway, when it comes time for the city to express its thoughts, I'm hoping council's strong opinion will be, first and foremost, that when the site, or if the site, and I pray that it does, and I believe it can and it should, has a new owner, because they didn't go bankrupt. They just chose to close this site. Whoever purchases the site gets absolute first dibs at all the power that it produces, like the mill used to, and at a favorable cost, to continue the livable wage jobs in this community, which is a must, and to continue the tax credits, which are about 20% of our taxes, 15, 20, 16, 17, look, I was right in the middle of there, percent of what it takes to run this city. And for you folks to know, when we raise taxes here at this table, reluctantly, 1%, it only brings in $150,000, which probably doesn't even cover our collective agreement minimums. So think about that. So we need that site to produce, and we need those folks to continue to remember why they're there. So the other issue that I do have sympathy for, but I wish them good luck, because I hear it's very difficult, is that depending on who goes there and starts needing power, apparently they have to spend another $45 million on the Powell River site to upgrade the penstocks, I'm told. And they have nobody to sell the power to, nobody. They've been blocked, so they just have to sit there, which, I think helps Powell River a lot in its thoughts and such. I know the First Nations have been in discussions with Brookfields, and Brookfields has called the city of Powell River as well. So I want to make those two points. Thirdly, as far as the mill site is concerned, for us to set up a task force or a mayor's task force or what have you to start looking at what it is we want that happen there, we don't own that site. It's going to belong to whoever it belongs to. And then the big question of Section 21 will be out there, and you can bet with every nickel that Commerce has, is that is going to be guarded by the next purchaser, whoever, if we are fortunate to get a good community climate minded citizen purchaser. And they are out there, and I bet you the mayor has had, I don't know, 18, 20 inquiries about the property. We don't even own it, but they like to call the mayor's office. And there's probably 3 or 4 really good, solid opportunities for our city there. So, yes, the others are not worthy in my view, but who am I? So I know. So there are some opportunities there for us, and but we have to remember that we don't own it. They didn't go bankrupt, and so we just hope that somebody, that a good solid group purchases the site, and that we see jobs and taxes continue to come in. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much.
So through the chair, am I allowed to do this?
Yeah, just thank you, Mayor Formosa, for all that clarification. We would greatly appreciate it. And Ms. Gould, go right ahead to ask the mayor whatever questions you want.
Okay, so just in terms of the 2 possibilities, it seems to me that you could dedicate power. You could say this power is going to whatever replaces the mill, or you could make money off of the exports. So that's the Columbia Basin model. The first one, I was time stressed, so I didn't include the precedent up at Trail, where Teck-Cominco's dams were bought by BC Hydro and provide electricity to that smelter. So that's, you've got 2 possible community benefits avenues. And then in terms of making this actually happen, I guess that's why I used to work for local government. I know your agenda is already 100% full. So how do you make room for this? And we're encouraging council to look at grants, to hire experts to help you find the possibilities. If you talk to Brookfield, they'll tell you you can't do this. So you're going to need some very heavy hitters, some people who will know the sector and what the public innovation possibilities are. And that's a particular kind of expertise, because you can hire lawyers who will say, don't do this, you'll get in trouble. But right now, in Powell River, we need some innovative thinking, because we've been hit by 2 major blows: the dam exporting all their energy and the closure of the mill. So it's going to take a lot of work to shift gears on this.
Thank you, Mrs. Gould. I don't think we're finished yet. I think, Councillor Elliott, you had your hand up?
Yes, I did.
Oh, sorry. Hang on. We have Doubt first and then Elliott. Sorry.
Why am I not?
Yeah, he was second.
Yeah, it was a while ago, Councillor Elliott. Thanks for coming, and thanks for doing all the work to prepare this. As a trail person, I was born there, Trail in Nelson. I spent time driving between the 2 cities and looking at all the different dams that were up there. I'll try to get that stopped. Sorry about that. So I'm well aware of that, and all the work that they've gone through with the international treaty that set that up, because it didn't just affect cities and towns and Indigenous people in Canada. It also goes across the border and affects people in Washington State. And been the subject of many legal activities, but actually, you've talked about how do you start the work as part of your comments there, and actually it was started at the C3, and actually before that with the mayor approaching the regional district governments, which are representing property around the watersheds, and the Tla'amin Nation, which also has rights in the area, and trying to introduce the concept of working on a partnership to move forward with that. And I think in the modern days, like the present time, reconciliation and consultations with First Nations is of primary importance, and that's really where we have to start. have to begin with seeing if we can find an agreement with the Tla'amin Nation and hopefully the regional district as well to find a way to go forward, and all of these things will fall into place as we go along, and I think we're moving towards that. Not necessarily going to be fast, but that kind of thing takes time. Notice that in your recommendations, I think if we start with the concept of working together and trying to form partnerships and getting people to buy in on that, it'll become clear how we can move forward. On the other recommendations, you talked about Section 21 as it applies to the lands within the mill site. And that's not a simple situation because we also have applications for the Section 21 lands that the city owns outside of the mill site. And I think we can deal with those in their appropriate times. And I hope I'm not going to surprise the CAO too much when I ask him if he can give us a brief rundown of where we are today and what the council's plans are for the near future for dealing with Section 21, so everybody's more or less on the same page.
Thank you, Councillor Doubt. CAO Brewer, go right ahead.
Not surprised. I welcome the surprises. The status hasn't changed much from when I presented in December and then provided a bit of an update last month in response to some correspondence you had. So the province is still intending to bring in the regulation that identifies the boundary for the Section 21 properties within a couple weeks probably. They had originally said towards the end of March, end of February, beginning March. That's still the tentative plan. I got an update about a couple weeks ago, I guess, on that. So the Incorporation Act amendment happened, as everyone knows, and then the next step was to bring in the regulation that had the map accompanying the regulation to outline what the boundary is. So that's imminent, within a week or two, is the last update I had.
Okay, that's a legislative element, if I can say so, that's been underway for some time, and we're just on the verge of completion of that part, right?
Correct. And the other update provided last month was with respect to should council at some point want to make a request for full repeal of Section 21. That's another Incorporation Act amendment that would have to go through the process again with the province. And the earliest that could happen was the fall of 2023, they said. And should this council submit something like that during this term, they said we would get a letter similar to what we received in 2014 that said they'd like to wait until a new council's in place because it was close to the election. So they indicated that that would likely be the same scenario. They suggested wait until a new council's in place. If there's a request for full repeal, it could go through the same process, but the earliest would be fall of 2023.
Thanks to the update. I just thought that having that update for everybody would be a good idea so people would know where we are. And the mayor has started the approach to a partnership to the other two bodies of local government. We're thinking about Section 21, and I want to say thanks again for coming with the list of suggestions about where we can go in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Doubt. Mayor Formosa, you have another comment?
Yeah, I think for the purpose, just in case not everybody in the public or those listening know what we are referring to when we say Section 21. Maybe the CAO could give a brief little lesson on what is Section 21. Thank you.
Okay, now that's maybe a bit of a surprise. There's not really a brief synopsis, but City of Powell River is unusual in that it does have a Section 21 that was built into our Incorporation Act. So it precludes the municipality from, at the time when it was established, from putting in regulations that would restrict the operations on the mill site. So at the time, that boundary was quite large. It extended, well, it currently still extends all the way to Willingdon Beach and most of the mill site, obviously, and all the way to Wildwood Bridge. So obviously at the time when Powell River was incorporated, quite a strong lobby for ensuring the municipality would not restrict operations at the mill, and that's why it's in place. It's the only example of its kind in the province.
And if you take it a step further, so then, the city now owns portions, and we have applied 3 years ago, so there. And finally, we're at the point now that Section 21 zoning will be removed. So just a little the properties that that are in. You kind of mentioned some of them and what's coming out.
So it's been a long-standing desire that the city remove Section 21 entirely. It's built into our OCP. The community's always expressed a desire, subsequent councils have expressed that desire to get rid of it entirely. However, the province has always said that's not simple. It has to go to the province. The Incorporation Act has to be amendment, and you need in particular, the mill owner or on side and any stakeholders that would have an interest. So when the request went in to remove Section 21 on city-owned properties, that was a much easier process. It was still subject to consultation with groups, stakeholders, and Tla'amin Nation. So the regulation that's imminent within a week or two will reflect that consultation that happened, particularly with respect to Tla'amin Nation and their request for what the amendment would look like.
Does that answer your question, Mayor Formosa?
It wasn't a question, I just wanted to give that small lesson to the public that might wonder what is Section 21. So I thank the CAO for explaining it so that folks understand what it is. 'Cause not everybody has a Section 21.
Thank you. And Councillor Elliott. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. It's all really good information. Ellen Gould, thank you for coming here. I'm really happy to see what you have to say here. The idea is quite popular, I think, among the community and our council that there should be benefits to the community for the energy produced here. So it's not complicated. The idea is very simple. Implementation is where it gets complicated because of but the real opportunity here is that the mill is closing, and the mill is the beneficiary of much of the legislation, the licenses, everything. So if you pull the mill out of the question, there should, that's where the opportunity comes about for us to come out with something different. So we all understand the opportunity is now. If the mill sells and someone else operates another mill, then the legal situation can't change. But if they do something other than a mill, then perhaps there is opportunity legally to have things changed. And getting our ducks in a row is definitely what we want to do. Your advice around hiring a subject matter expert on that, to help us get those ducks in a row. Did you have people or names or anybody in mind that you could share with us?
Yeah, because I used to work in the sector, I definitely am thinking about a particular kind of expert, because you could get a Brookfield advisor and they take you to the cleaners, right? They tell you why you can't do what you want to do. So you need a public interest. So I've got a couple of names I could forward them to.
The CAO. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Councillor Hathaway and then Mayor Formosa.
Thanks. Just quickly, thank you for that, Ellen. You put a lot of work into it, and it's really appreciated. And I agree with Councillor Elliott. I think probably we do need an expert to help us define what our options are. But I certainly think the people of Powell River deserve some of those dollars coming into the community, similar to community forest kind of dollars, because there's been huge disruption, as you note, the salmon and upper areas and the mill, the Powell Lake up and down, that it's the ownership of the area, and I like the Columbia River Basin Treaty. That would probably be a good example to follow, I think, but I'm not an expert. So thanks again. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Hathaway. And Mayor Formosa, last comment.
All righty, thanks. So Councillor Elliott asked my question of Ms. Gould, if she had any names of any contractors, and she's been working on that. Secondly, I want to thank Ms. Gould and the other member of the public that sent us the letter to, I think, Councillor Hathaway, that got us looking at this. So thank you for that. Good public, keeping their eye open. And I think regardless of who purchases it, whether it's a mill or not, the opportunity is now because there's a break here. So, you know, like the community forest, I mean, I don't mind at all, you know, seeing if there's an opportunity. We don't own these things, but to share. And you know, we've got issues with the waterfront here that need to be risen because we are a coastal community. The cost of our public lands that we must increase, and costs of other things that this whole community, fighting fire and fire blocks. There's so many things that, you know, this, you know, could be a useful thing that, and commerce carries on. They've had 100 years. Now, not maybe Brookfields, but those dams have produced for a corporation for 100 years. And if they need help to get a license and to sell, it's difficult to sell into the U.S., I've learned, because under the free trade, then the U.S. are going to want to come this way, and I don't think they're allowed. So it's going to be a tough one for them. But I don't know. I'm just learning the file. But I think there's an opportunity for everybody to do well with this opportunity with a new facility. And if we can make green hydrogen, we can spend 100 years making a clean fuel. Wouldn't that be fun? Thanks.
So through the chair, if I can, just one more comment.
Last comment.
Response. Okay. When I talked about public consultation on the future of the mill, I know that we don't own the site and we don't own the dams. I'm not making that as sort of a pro forma thing that citizens groups say that we want to be consulted, the public should be consulted. I think there's positive value for council in engaging the public so that your issues go further up the flagpole for the powers that be. So if you have strong public support through a public engagement process, it will get on more people's radar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving along, now that we are finished the delegation portion of our agenda, we will move to correspondence, part 4. And 4.1 is an email received February 13, 2022. Okay, we've got some movement. Just hang on, folks.
Section delegation, public. The public participation in that delegation was more than it was for the map.
Yeah. No, it's a good idea. Good luck, but it's a good idea. And some of these are name change too. These are all names.
But they stuck for this one. They stayed for this one.
Yeah.
They wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
They're not sticking around to ask questions at the end.
No. I've met that group twice. Hey, did you ever figure out what this was for? I'll show you.
Okay. Moving along on today's agenda, we move to item 4.1, an email received February 13, 2022 from Lorraine Richards regarding community gardens. Council, what is your wish? Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciated this letter, and there's a really great, there's a link to a really great guide on developing community gardens in the provincial publication in this letter. I think Ms. Richards is looking for an assurance that there will be consultation. I would assume that would happen before such a thing would happen, but I just wonder if there might be any comments from staff in that regard.
I think
Or
we
what-
request
where
a
this-
report to come forward on this. Our CAO Brewer?
Correct, that's right. At the Feb 1st Committee of the Whole, I think it was, direction was given to bring back a report on Rotary's proposal. So that's what you will get at some point, and it'll speak to some of the resources that are available and community engagement as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So do we have to note and file, or what's our pleasure?
Chair, you could just move on to the next item if you like. You don't need to receive it unless you choose to do so.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Doe, did you have a comment?
I was just going to suggest we note and file it so we could move forward.
Okay, Chair, 4.2.
Thank you. So we move along on to item 4.2, an email received February 14th, 2022 from Jamie Ford regarding housing crisis. I'm sure you've all had a chance to read this one-page letter. And what would you like to do, Council? Councillor Doe?
I just want to comment that the letter writer is right. We have a severe housing problem, and it's from everything from affordable houses to medium-price houses to high-price houses to houses for the homeless. And we have a serious housing crisis in here, and we have to address it, or it's just going to get worse. It's not going to get better all by itself. And, that's just my comment, and leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Doe. Councillor Hathaway?
Thank you. In reading that, I just took a look back on what we have accomplished, which is a lot. Yeah, there is a housing shortage, and I don't disagree, but I have a few numbers here just to give ourselves a little pat in the back. Some of the recent affordable housing developments, these are some that are completed and some that are online, but we have brought in or in process 144 units. That's a fair amount for this little community. And then market housing, we just have a huge number. I've got listed here either just recently completed or on the books in some way, shape, or form, and some of them including some affordable housing, 527 units. So that comes out to, planning can correct me if I'm wrong, but 671 units, and that doesn't include, these are apartments and condos and that sort of thing. It doesn't include like the Darren Edwards type building that is ongoing. He's building all the time and creating new houses and that sort of thing. So I don't think we've done too bad for a small community. We need to continue working on it, but I think we've done pretty well thus far. So I'm giving us a pat in the back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hathaway. And next on the speaking order, we have Mayor Formosa.
Well, basically, Councillor Hathaway said exactly what I was going to say, but without the, the accurate numbers. I was just going to mention that, 14 years, 3 of us have been here. And in the last, this year, we're delivering the first. And through different communities and such, and the city supporting every way they can, at least 4 brand new large facilities for housing and it's for the vast majority, so far has been for low income and supportive. And then we have that very large apartment that is going ahead. So we have a lot of housing stock coming on, but folks are coming quicker than we can, build them. But the city planning department went from basically, 3 to 6, 7. That shows that we have ramped up housing. Now, you talk about affordable housing, the only way that's going to happen, yes, we can help with land and other agencies can help with land, but we need real dollars to build with. And cost of housing to build is very, very expensive. So we keep chasing grants, we keep looking at ways to build cash because nobody gives us the cash. We're a local government. So if they want us to build the housing, then we got to raise land tax. We can't do it. It's not our job. But we continue to work hard, made these good numbers despite of ourselves where we got no money coming in other than applying for grants. So, we send a thank you to Mr. Jamie Ford, the writer, for writing, and we'll let him know how hard we're working to try and fulfill that mandate. And thank you.
So thank you, Mayor Formosa. Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Chair. I love what I've seen in terms of that's been described already that we've been watching for the past few years now. And a lot of that is just starting to turn up now. some of these developments. However, I've also been in discussion with my son, who's 24 and in university, and various others in his age group, and they don't know how. My son, when he gets if he ends up getting the registered professional forester outcome of his university training, he figures that he would have to make about 1.5 or 2 times as much as what is listed in the provincial listings for what RPFs make in order to afford something like the modest mid-60s spec house that I live in. And we've been trying to figure out how do we help leverage him into something like that. And this is a problem that many young people are facing right now. I've also recently watched a documentary on the Knowledge Network by a UN raconteur that points to the commodification of real estate internationally, that basically has something to do with how the prices are inflated beyond the reach of these young people. That's a problem that I don't have an answer for, but I sure have been looking for it, and I really, really hope that somehow there can be some kind of an adjustment so that our young people actually do have opportunity. I took Jamie Fort to be a young person because Jamie is talking exactly the same language as my son and his friends. Now, some of them are lucky, but this is a challenge, and I don't know, maybe financial adjustments in the near future are going to change things, but I don't know. It's a mystery to me, and it's a worry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Southcott. I think you speak for all of us in that regard to our youth and the predicament they're in on the housing front. It just boggles my mind, and I won't say any more than that. We could talk about that for hours. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. The letter writer is clearly right. There's a housing crisis not just here, but across the entire nation. I think the faster, we're working hard at investing in our permitting section of our city staff and getting inspections done faster and all of those good things that we're doing to make sure housing gets built. There's a ton under construction now that might make a difference on the rental market coming up in the next year or so. But the real thing I think we need to do as citizens in our country or as people is we need to start lobbying the larger governments around this issue of housing prices in Canada. And it may be that something can be done about the amount of money being spent on houses that comes from outside of people who come from outside of Canada here and spend a lot of money on housing that's inflating the prices. And maybe we want to look politically further abroad to try and impact that across the nation. That would be my suggestion for all people, is to pay attention to Canadian policies around how houses are used as investments for other folks. Thanks.
Just to accent those comments, Councillor Elliott, my daughter and her husband just bought a place in South Surrey just before Christmas. I was down last week helping them move in, and she just sent me a note today saying, Dad, the house 3 doors down, which is a smaller house, a smaller lot, just sold, and it sold for an additional $300,000 in terms of what they paid for their larger house and larger yard. That's what's going on. It's criminal, and I don't know what to do. Anyway, Council, we're up against it. So, having said that, let's move along on today's agenda. We next have item 4.3, email received February 20th, 2022 from Shirley Gentner regarding Mayor's Task Force. Ms. Gentner, are you here?
No, it's just.
Oh, is this just correspondence? Right. Sorry. Council, what is your wish?
Chair, I think we spent a fair amount of time talking about Section 21 and the BC Facilities Commission. That's basically what this letter is asking for. Also asking, that we create, as the last speaker, a community task force to talk about these issues. That's so, in light of that, yeah, it's kind of a repeat of the last section.
Right. Mayor Formosa had a hard time hearing you. Want to just repeat
Sorry
that,
about that.
in short order?
Yeah, what I had said is that, sorry about that. This particular letter is a repeat of the last
Delegation.
presentation that we had from the speaker on the issue of Section 21 and on the issue of the dam and the export and import of power, and setting up a community task force or group to help look at Section 21 and creating a trust fund and getting the three governments. I think we dealt with that there, and this is a reiteration of that request, probably in support of the last speaker, Alan Gould. So note and file, I would say, but I don't know what council's wish is.
Yes, I'm hearing note and file.
Yep.
Hearing nods. Yes, that's what we'll do. Thank you very much. And we moved to item 4.4, an email received February 21st, 2022 from Pat Martin regarding creating a trust for the Powell River COTW region. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. This letter is also a letter outlining how Powell River could follow in the footsteps of the Columbia Basin and create a trust for the power generated here. Similarly, the conversation that was held with Ellen Gould, I think the letter is well written and it has some excellent information and advice, and I thank Pat Martin for it. I agree with the suggestions in the letter, and I think we let the CAO have that as in part and parcel with Aaron Gould's parcel as information for us to use as advice as we move forward with this at this time. Thanks.
Appreciate all the information we're getting in this regard. Thank you very much. And note and file, Council. Thank you. We move along on today's agenda to item 5.4, correspondence regarding possible name change from January. These are letters contained from January 29th to February 24th, 2022.
Through the chair, same thing, note and file, add to the list that the clerk's office is keeping on this whole file of the possible name change. So these are just more opinions of citizens, and so we keep them for the file so that when the day comes, we read them. I've read mine. We have the information so that when we go to make an informed decision, we can review it all at the same time again.
Yep, thank you, Mayor Formosa. Thank you for that clarification. We'll be coming forward. So all of these letters will be in the binder that's shared with the working group, and I'm sure the task force. So, having heard that, note and file. Thank you. And we'll move now to item section 5, reports. 5.1, development variance permit 266, 5987 Lund Street. Welcome.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to declare a conflict on the next two items, development variance permit 266, and then on 5.2, Wildwood Pub, structural change with increased occupancy. They are a pub owner, one of the companies of which I am a principal, or my family is a principal, is a pub owner, and they're actually our good neighbors. So I'll go to the committee room and call me when you're done, these two. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And welcome, Mrs. Pukash.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here today. I'm pleased to be presenting the first of two reports on behalf of the Wildwood Public House, the first one being for Development Variance Permit 266. I'd also like to welcome Mr. John Wright and Mr. Colin McRae, who are here in the gallery today on behalf of the Wildwood Pub. So if this committee does have any questions specifically for them, I'm sure that they'd be happy to address at the end of the presentation. So the Wildwood Pub's located at 5987 Lund Street. It's at the corner of Sutherland Avenue and Lund Street, being an extension of Highway 101 in the neighborhood of Wildwood. The property is zoned C3, neighborhood commercial. which supports neighborhood-based commercial uses such as small retail stores, gas bars, licensed restaurants and pubs, and some general office use in financial institutions. So a neighborhood pub has existed on this property since the 1970s. Most recently, the Red Line Pub was at this location before the current ownership group purchased the property and undertook extensive interior and exterior renovations and rebranded it to the Wildwood Public House, which reopened in 2019. And if the photos appear a little bit grainy, it's because I pirated them from the Wildwood Pub's Instagram page, and they perhaps aren't as clear in resolution once you blow them up a bit. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, restrictions by the public health officer limited the operations and capacity of bars and restaurants. In an attempt to support businesses who were required to limit their interior patron capacity, the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, or the LCRB, launched a temporary expanded service area, or TESA, program, which allowed for the temporary creation of or expansion of existing patios so that these types of premises could increase the number of patrons that were served outside. The Wildwood Pub expanded their existing patio space into their front parking lot in the area identified in the photograph and outlined in the white and red dotted line. A planning report to this committee from June of 2020 regarding consent to the TESA authorization outlined a planning staff's position that should the Wildwood Pub wish to make this temporary expanded space a permanent licensed service area, any off-street parking shortage would have to be addressed by way of a variance application. As the LCRB is set to expire all TESAs by June of this year, the Wildwood Pub has applied for both a variance to relax parking requirements and a council resolution with respect to a permanent structural change to their liquor primary license. Should this committee be willing to consider a variance on parking, a liquor license structural change application will be presented following this report. So the city zoning bylaw establishes minimum required off-street parking spaces for restaurants and bars based upon total number of seats in the premises, whereas patron capacity for a liquor license is based upon occupancy limits set by the BC Building Code, which have more to do with total size of the premises and number of washroom facilities. The property owner has advised that should the expanded patio outside be approved, the Wildwood Pub would have a total number of seats inside and out totaling 110. The zoning bylaw requires 1 parking space per 5 restaurant seats, which would set the pub's off-street parking requirement at 22 spaces. The total number of parking spaces proposed to be provided off-street, as I've outlined here on this drawing, is 15. And the image provided identifies where those 15 parking spaces are proposed to be located on the site. There is a history of parking concerns for the property. Generally with respect to patrons, either parking on the street along the curb too close to the intersection with Sutherland and the highway, or parking further up Sutherland Street, partially obscuring or blocking a resident's driveway. In late 2020, following council's consideration of the TESA approval, city roads crews did undertake some upgraded paint markings at the intersection in an attempt to both alleviate some of the on-street parking concerns and more clearly mark the traffic lanes entering and exiting the highway. As seen in this Google Street View photo from December of 2020, you can see bright yellow markings on the curbs on both sides of Sutherland Avenue, which identify no parking areas in close proximity to the intersection and specifically prohibit street parking adjacent and directly opposite the pub. These markings should effectively relocate overflow parking further up Sutherland and closer to James Thompson Elementary School, generally vacated during the pub's late afternoon and evening service hours. So when considering a relaxation of off-street parking requirements to support a local business, the direct impact to neighbors should be weighed against the overall social and economic benefits to the larger community. Planning staff recognize that residents living in proximity to this business have had to contend with vehicles parking on the street, partially blocking driveways or obscuring their visibility. Formal parking complaints to the city since the TESA approval for the expanded patio have numbered only 1 in the last 18 months. But planning staff do recognize that the overall patron numbers of the pub have likely decreased as a result of provincial health orders related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's possible any individual parking complaints may have been dealt with directly between the neighbors and the pub operators. Planning staff are required to present all applications received to council and feel it's reasonable for council to consider this variance application after neighboring residents have had an opportunity to be heard through the public notice process. Therefore, the recommendation before this committee today is that staff be directed to undertake the public notice process as required by the Local Government Act, which would involve a notice mail out to property owners within a 61-meter radius of the Wildwood Pub property, and then we would return this application to a future council meeting for consideration.
Councillor Hathaway, thank you for that presentation. Straightforward.
Thank you for the presentation. And I just recall years ago, the council of the day, someone made an application for a local neighborhood pub, and I remember it being turned down due to a lack of parking, and they totally missed the mark on the understanding of a neighborhood pub. And I really see the Wildwood one as a neighborhood pub, and from what I hear, that the majority of people in the neighborhood actually walk to it. So, and it doesn't sound like it's been an issue previously, so I'm in favor of moving ahead with it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hathaway. Appreciate the input. Councillor Doak.
Yeah, coincidentally, this premises is a short walk from my house, so I know the route, and I know how many people park there on a busy day because I see them when I'm going home early. I don't stay late. But you know, the parking is an issue. Actually, when the city went out and painted all of the yellow lines that are there, and there's a lot of them along Sutherland Street, the parking congestion improved, and people, you know, followed the no parking regulations along the yellow lines. Those lines are disappearing again. And, you know, when the pub is at its busiest and over a few hours, generally around the dinner hour kind of time, there are a number of cars parked up Sutherland Street. When I was walking home the other night, I counted them just for curiosity, and there were eight additional vehicles parked on Sutherland Street, which is exactly the difference between the 23 in the bylaw and the 15 in the variance. You know, I think it's less of a problem than it might have been otherwise for people across the highway. And frankly, I don't know if that's because the sewer line construction was going along there and the other side of the highway has been blocked off for most of the last couple of months. But I understand that this application just actually makes permanent the changes that are already there. The extended patio is already there, and that's the intended permanent structure. And the parking is there. I think the business is an asset to the neighborhood. People enjoy it, and I think it's acceptable myself.
Thank you, Councillor Doak. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rachel Pukesh. Appendix D has the draft of the variance permit, and there's some photos attached to it that seem unrelated. Maybe you could help me understand what this house diagram has to do with the variance we're talking about.
Chair, if I can, yeah, it's the incorrect image.
Oh, okay.
So the correct image will be included with the council report.
So my confusion is real because it doesn't actually relate.
Yes, you are confused for valid reason.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That was my question. I didn't know what that was about.
Okay, thank you. And so where are we with this discussion? I'm sorry, I got sidetracked with my phone going off.
Yeah.
Councillor Hathaway.
You want me to read the recommendation?
Oh, Councillor Leishman, did you have a comment?
Chair, I was going to move the recommendation.
Okay, very good.
I move that staff be directed to give notice in accordance with Section 499 of the Local Government Act of Council's intention to consider issuance of Development Variance Permit 266 for 5987 Lund Street, legally described as Lot B, Block 2, District Lot 4173, Plan 8078, PID 010 261-371, that would vary City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100-2006 by reducing the required number of off-street parking spaces from 22 to 15 to facilitate the expansion of a licensed outdoor patio.
Moved by Councillor Leishman, seconded by Councillor Southcott. Any additional comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Unanimous?
I just had one comment as well. I don't believe that there is 5 parking spots in the area that they're trying to remove to get, or 7 parking spots. So to get to 22, that space wouldn't get them to 22 either, would it?
Through the chair, that's correct, but the patio expansion adds 30 additional seats, which increases their minimum parking requirement by 6 additional spaces. So that 22 includes the additional 6. So if you remove that patio space and the 30 additional seats, as well as reclaim those parking spots, they would be meeting their parking requirements because it would decrease their total number of seats in the pub and make available more parking spaces on site.
Right, thank you for that.
Thank you for that clarification. Not hearing any other comments, all in favor? Unanimous. Now, we have a second recommendation. Councillor? No, Chair, that will be coming back to the next council. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And we move to item 5.2, which is Wildwood Pub LCRB structural change with increased occupancy to licensed patio.
Thank you very much. So this is part 2 of my presentations on behalf of the Wildwood Pub. So related to the development permit application to relax the off-street parking is a separate application from the Wildwood Pub for council approval of their LCRB application to make their expanded patio space a permanent licensed service area, which would thereby increase their patron capacity for the patio from 15 to 45 people. So as mentioned in the first presentation, Council gave consent back in June 2020 for the LCRB to issue a TESA approval to the Wildwood Pub, which allowed it to expand its existing front patio. The existing front patio is shown in this image above as the expansion out the front with the patio umbrellas on it. As the LCRB is set to expire all TESAs by the end of June, the Wildwood Pub has now applied to the LCRB to make their expanded patio a permanent service area. That is a permanent structural change application to their liquor primary license, and it requires a local government provide consent. But the city's delegation bylaw does not authorize staff to provide comment or such consent back to the LCRB, as the proposed patio expansion contains more than 10 seats. Therefore, that consent and any comment associated with it must come directly from council. For clarity, the application before council relates only to the expansion of the outdoor licensed patio for 30 more seats. There are no proposed changes to the approvals the Wildwood Pub already has in place for their original patio, nor for their internal patron capacity or their hours of operation. So here's another photo shamelessly pirated from the Wildwood Pub's Instagram page, but I thought that it actually really nicely illustrated both the extent and the nature of the expanded patio area, in addition to reflecting the 5 patio tables providing additional seating for 30 people. So the patio area is accessed through a gate from the existing outdoor patio, which in turn is accessed from an interior door to the inside of the pub. The patio, in its current state, has operated under its TESA authorization since June of 2020, and should this structural change to their liquor license be approved, the applicant intends to invest in more permanent upgrades to this space through the use of fencing, landscaping, and art installation. So considering a structural change to an existing license application requires council to weigh the impact of such a change on the community as a whole and any potential direct impact to adjacent neighbors, specifically in terms of noise and parking. So council, this committee's already heard and discussed the potential impact of parking. In terms of noise and other associated disturbances, the expanded patio space has been operating since the summer of 2020. And city staff have again received no formal complaints on file regarding excessive noise from the patio itself. Staff are by no means downplaying any potential disturbance or impact to residential properties, and the pub's operators have advised the patio will remain open only till 10 o'clock in the evenings, and every effort will be made to mitigate any excessive noise coming from the patio. Staff did refer this application out and the parking variance application out to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, as the permanent expanded patio proposes to abut the provincial highway. The local area manager conducted a site visit and confirmed that Modi had no concerns with either approval being sought. In keeping with past practice on all other LCRB applications, the recommendation before Council is to opt out of any public consultation and comment to the LCRB. However, that approach is also at Council's discretion, and should it choose otherwise, Council Policy 196 would set out the process to be followed for any public engagement generally involving public notice and the holding of a public hearing. Thanks very much this afternoon, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Questions, concerns? Councillor Elliott.
Given that we've had a pandemic and the occupancy's been down, probably the noise levels would not be representative of a post-pandemic world. And I'm not entirely sure that it's a good representation around that. So I just had concerns about that, and probably the question about whether we should opt in or opt out would be, I would like to know what the people of the neighborhood would think about that before we decided on that.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Hathaway.
Council?
To Council, just before we deal with that, Councillor Doe, you have a comment?
I just would say that this has been operating for, I think, about a year in this configuration already, and it doesn't seem to have any negative impact on the neighborhood from my point of view, and I live a few houses away.
Seeing no other comments, I tend to, I'm going to just make a quick comment. I tend to support Councillor Elliott's concern in regards coming out of the COVID era that we are living in. And if we're going to get everybody and their brother and sister and children coming for food or drink to this facility, the numbers could increase substantially, and there could be some ramifications around the neighborhood. That is a concern. It's logical that could happen. But hearing none in the last year and a half, you've got to say we haven't heard any concerns. Councillor Leishman.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that by opting out, it doesn't prevent the LCRB from doing their own engagement. So it just puts the onus on the LCRB to do it. And as we have heard, I mean, it's been operating for a couple of years and it's been not very many issues. So I would support sending this to Council.
Okay. Councillor Dowd.
I just have a question for staff. I think we could pass this one, item 5.2, and it still wouldn't be able to be completed permanently if 5.1 wasn't agreed to by council. Is that right?
Through the chair, that's correct, Councillor Dowd. Thank you for the question. As the city providing a consent or approval back to the LCRB on any structural change application requires the local government to confirm the property is in compliance with all city bylaws, were council not to consider the relaxation or the granting of the relaxation on parking, the establishment of the permanent patio would leave them, let's say, not in compliance with the zoning bylaws parking requirements. So the applications are very much tied to each other.
And my point there for Councillor Elliott and Councillor Palm was that 5.1 does require public consultation, and we're providing notice.
Through the chair, that is correct. We will be doing a public notice mail out. The difference is public consultation for under Council Policy 196 for a structural change to a liquor license involves the holding of a public hearing prior to council consideration. A development variance permit requires public notice and no hearing, but public notice and the ability for the public to weigh in.
Okay, so if the public wanted to comment on the parking or the structure or anything, they can come and do that at that time.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, that brings up just one more point of, in my mind, the clarification. If we opt out, right now this is mailed to, you said, made reference to 61 feet or 61 meters?
61 meters, which is approximately 200 feet. Yeah.
200 feet. So is there any change if we were to not opt out on what the requirement would be on the mail out in terms of distance?
My understanding is council always has the ability to prescribe or request a significantly larger mail-out area than what is our norm for a variance if they see fit. I'm sorry if that's...
No, but just to clarify, if we were not to opt out, we would have to conduct our own. We wouldn't be going to Victoria to do it, or would they be coming in?
Through the chair, thanks for the question. No, our bylaws would require, if this council opts into public consultation, our bylaws would require the applicant to pay another $1,600 for the city to conduct the public hearing engagement, the mail out, the notification, and then the holding of the public hearing.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Hathaway, you had a request.
I just said to council with it.
Okay. Is there, do I hear agreement to take this forward to council? Anyone opposed? Hearing none, unanimous to council. Thank you very much. And at this point in time, I guess we can call your worship back. And while we're doing that, I just have to check on one thing here on my phone. It's been buzzing in my ear all day. Okay, moving along on tonight's agenda, we now move to item 5.3, Carriage House Program Update and Recommended SOCP Changes for Housing. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon. Let's get the mic up there. There we go. So thank you for having me. The purpose of this report is to first give you an update on carriage houses in City of Powell River, since it's been about 4 years since council adopted changes to allow them. And we're also, staff are requesting council support to give notice of early engagement. Sorry, requesting council's to do early engagement, to inform a sustainable official community plan update, to make a couple of tweaks to the carriage house rules in the SOCP so that we can remove some barriers that we've been seeing people encountering in the last 4 years. And following that, if that's council's wish to go in that direction, following that we would look at zoning bylaw changes too at a future date. We're just not quite there yet. We would need to do the SOCP early engagement first. So I got a bit of a summary of carriage houses so far. So we've had about 43 development permit applications for carriage houses in the last 4 years. 8 of them didn't proceed for various reasons, and a lot of that had to do with how our SOCP defines what a carriage house is and how our zoning bylaw defines what a carriage house is. So if something is on 2 stories, unfortunately we cannot approve it because the way we've defined a carriage house is it's all on 1 level. A couple of other challenges we've had are where the specific zone of where a carriage house is being proposed, and so we've maybe taken an application by mistake, and carriage houses that are too large. So those are the 8 that have not proceeded. It's usually fallen into one of those categories. And then of the applications we've received, 13 have gone forward for a development variance permit. Most of those have been for new carriage houses. So the next section there is that 17 of the carriage house development permits have been for brand new carriage houses, so built from scratch brand new carriage house, and 13 have been when someone's had an existing accessory building that they've wanted to convert into a carriage house. And so out of those 43 applications, we have 22 active and complete at a building permit stage or that's already completed construction. So I think I've actually already summarized most of these points, but the main point on this slide is that we're hearing from the community members who are coming in to apply for carriage houses that many of them are intended for intergenerational living. 40% is we hear is for children or for parents to live there. We've been surprised about how many conversion applications there have been. We were not expecting to see that, and that's one area where our bylaws, the development permit guidelines in particular, we need some help there. Because if someone has an existing building, maybe it's too close according to our development permit rules to the principal dwelling, so we can't allow it as a carriage house. Other examples are people taking something that's a shed and they're bringing it from a shed level of building code to a residential level of building code, but maybe we could ask them to do some more for the landscaping and the cladding and the general appearance of the building. We currently don't have tools in our development permit guidelines to do that. And then the rest of that I've already covered. So our proposed changes so attached to the report in the appendix are some marked up development permit guidelines, so you can see specifically what we're thinking. Again, this is, we're requesting to go to early engagement before a public hearing, so we want to hear from the community, are we heading in the right direction? Is there something else you want to change? But basically, we would like to have the director have more ability to vary the siting when it's a conversion. So the building already exists on the ground, it was an accessory building that someone wants to turn into a dwelling unit. And so the building's there, so if the director has the ability to vary siting requirements, then that will reduce a barrier that people are experiencing. Another is to vary the separation distance between a main house and the conversion, so an existing accessory building. And then to require applicants who are doing converting an accessory building into a carriage house to upgrade their facades, and so that we're getting some higher quality buildings. The other thing that we would like to do in this housekeeping update is update some language around the performance security of landscaping requirements. And so right now we don't have language saying that staff may ask for performance security, and that to improve some language around the landscaping requirements and exemptions. In the future zoning bylaw updates, we would want to allow sleeping lofts or mezzanine in a carriage house. So that's currently not permitted, but we would want to let that happen in the future. We would like to look at setbacks, because right now the setback requirements are very small, which means that when people get to the building permit stage, they get surprised by fire separation requirements, which then leads them back to going to their designer and costing more money and spending more time, so we want to avoid that. We also want to consider increasing the maximum size of a carriage house. So right now it's 968 square feet, and you can just about squeeze 2 bedrooms in there. But if we're thinking about family-size housing, considering the housing need that we have in Powell River, we might want to consider increasing the size of carriage houses in certain lots. And we're not proposing to change any height requirements, because we think it's important that through the variance process, neighbors are notified about taller buildings, so that they can voice any concerns they might have about a 2-story carriage house, such as a carriage house on top of a garage, or maybe a carriage house that has that taller mezzanine if we go in that direction. The last thing that we're doing in this proposed amendment to this Sustainable Official Community Plan is looking at, so we just talked about the carriage house development permit. This one is looking at the residential small lots development permit, which is a separate development permit. This is our CD4 zone development permit, small single family homes on smaller lots. And staff are working on some new infill zones, which we haven't brought forward yet for council's consideration, but in preparation for that, we would like to consult the public on broadening the definition of what residential small lots are. So it's not just CD4, it could be broader than that. And that seemed timely to bring both housing type amendments to the official community plan together as one thing for council to discuss. So if you have any questions, I'll try my best to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Very, very informative. And Mayor Formosa, you're up first.
Thank you. Basically, what I just want to comment that I'm very pleased when I hear that we're here to update the bylaw because of the fact you're finding that it's causing log jams to our citizens, and that you feel we can do better. And so I just wanted to say thank you to your team, to your director, and to your team for looking in this busy time that we are in, and to being able to see these issues and then deal with them. I want to say thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. And in our speaking order, we have Doat, Elliott, and then Leishman.
So, this was a new idea when I was first on council, coming up with carriage houses and getting them to work and reviewing it and looking at how it's working and trying to make it work better for everybody is a good idea, and I appreciate that. Got one question that kind of leads into some other comments, and that question is, what is a family-sized house?
Through the chair, that's a great question. Even one more bedroom would make a difference to a 3-bedroom house instead of a 2-bedroom house. So I would have to consult with my building department on what kind of square footage they're seeing for those types of houses, but we couldn't fit 3 bedrooms in 968 square feet. And this 3-bedroom idea is coming from our housing needs assessment that said, at least for affordability and rentals, there's a gap at the 3-bedroom level.
And I just want to say, I think you want to be really careful on looking at the size restrictions there. A 3-bedroom house, I'm thinking is going to be 1,200, 1,300 square feet, or it may be 5,000 square feet, depending on your idea of what your house needs to have in it. And I think you start getting into questions relative to the size of the existing house on the property. As I know on my property, a 3-bedroom house would be bigger than the main house. And, be easier just to call my existing home a carriage house and build, whatever size I wanted on the rest of the property. But I think if we want it to be a carriage house and we want them to maintain some kind of particular character, I want to be really careful about the size. And I know they'd be way more popular if you could have 3 bedrooms and maybe a den and call it 4 bedrooms. But that's something that I'd want to be cautious about, is changing the size in your relationship to the existing homes.
Thank you, Councillor Doat. Good comments. And Councillor Elliott, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Danielle Ferguson. I think it's excellent timing to come forward with these proposed changes. I wanted to ask a question about, we have height, and you said something about it being all on the same floor, and the traditional definition of a carriage house is over a garage or a barn in one, from far, far back. So do our current rules and the rules we're going to change to allow folks to put a carriage house over their garage?
Through the chair, yes, currently you can, but you'd very most likely have to come forward with a variance for height. So off the top of my head, I don't recall what the height requirement is for an accessory building, and it depends by zone. So it's higher in the A1 and A2 zones. But yeah, so A1 and A2 is unlikely you'd come forward for a variance, and you could put a carriage house on top of a garage. But in our smaller residential zones, you would need a variance from council for height. And we're not proposing to change that just because height is a concern with neighbors, and it's good that they, in our opinion, it's good that they get notified that construction is going forward.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm very supportive of the idea of adding lofts, which can sometimes give you extra floor space within the same 960 that might give you the extra bedroom you're looking for, but it also might add height, which I'm wondering if we might want to revisit that height idea again. But also the situating with the new front back, if people's main homes are set quite a ways back, they may not have room to not put their, I don't want it to be a barrier that a person couldn't put a carriage house in front of their house, and I'm wondering why we do that. Depending on how the lot is already configured with the main house, that may be a barrier that's not very useful.
Through the chair, thank you. That's a great question. And Councillor Doubt brought up this idea of subordinacy, which is that the carriage house, the intention of the guidelines is that carriage house is subordinate. It's an accessory dwelling. It's secondary to the home. And I'm not a mind reader, so I don't know exactly what the person who wrote these had in mind about subordinacy, but I imagine it had to do with massing, which is how bulky the building is, the height, and the siting, the location, and all three contribute to subordinacy. We do allow some carriage houses to be located in the front of the principal house for certain situations, such as it's a waterfront property. But that is something we could consider in this process if the public and if council would like that relaxed further.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we have Councillor Leishman and then Councillor Hathaway.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Manager Ferguson. It's almost like you read my mind, planning department read my mind with bringing this forward, because I actually spent some time over Christmas break trying to design some carriage houses just for fun, and I couldn't, like, for a better bang for buck, a smaller footprint home is is more cost effective to build, but with the restrictions on the height for accessory buildings to 4.9 meters, I could really not get a second floor up there to put bedrooms up. So I really like the idea of that loft space above for people that do want a smaller footprint, but maybe they want their bedroom upstairs. But it is good to know that the height can be looked at through a development variance permit. I just would suggest that after public engagement and this work happens, if the changes go forward, I would just like to see some language in the carriage house documentation, just letting people know that they can apply for a variance for height, because just a lot of people, they'll go to the bylaws and just right away, as was spoken, like barriers, they'll see that there's a restriction and not really realize necessarily that they can apply for a variance. So it'd be good to just, break down some of those barriers and make it more accessible. So I'm really looking forward to this engagement on this and giving people more opportunities for being able to build these, because I thought if we do our housing authority, maybe we can even encourage a housing authority to manage some of these as rentals, but that's a whole nother conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Leishman. Councillor Hathaway.
Yeah, I just have a question around where, in the summary, the second bullet, and it talks about involving the fire department on fire safety concerns, and that would be addressed at the building permit stage. Why wouldn't they be addressed at the application stage, which may save an applicant a fair amount of work?
Yeah, through the chair, we often do that. So our development permit applications are referred currently to the fire department. Often there's concerns about and if there's a too narrow of a width for the truck to get down, or if it's too far away for a hose to reach. So I might have misspoken in that bullet, but yes, we do currently refer to the fire department at development permit stage, but sometimes the applicant, or we don't find out until building permit stage what the concern is.
I'm not sure I understand, because right now you're suggesting that they be involved at the permit stage, and I'm thinking if they're involved at the application stage, right at the get-go, the whole project might be kiboshed right there and save somebody a lot of extra work or whatever they do to get to the permitting stage. That's all. That's just my question.
Good point, Councillor Hathaway. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Southcott.
Kind of a mundane question. I probably know the answer, but from the suggestion of adding lofts, that would be square footage additional to the 968 or whatever is finally agreed upon, would it not? I think so. The loft would be additional square footage, because my understanding is 968 is the total square footage of a.
Yes, so as currently the 968's built floor area, which is livable floor areas inside the walls, and we don't allow lofts now, but if lofts were allowed and we kept the 968, yes, that would be all included in the built floor area calculation. But where this comes into play as well is we have coverage requirements where the carriage house and any like covered deck or patio has to be smaller in site coverage, which is different, so that's the outside walls and the outside supports, than the principal dwelling. So we do run into some challenges there, particularly in the R2 zone. So that's one reason to look at larger carriage houses potentially, but maybe not in all zones, is if, yeah, we allow a loft, then yes, it does come out the same 968 calculation.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no further questions or hands in the air, thank you very much, Mrs. Ferguson. Looking forward to your report
council?
coming forward. Yes, it's going to council, and then it'll come back to us again after that. Correct? Yes. Okay. Moving along on today's agenda, we now move to item 5.4, Consolidated Wastewater Treatment Plant Progress Report. Manager of Engineering Services, Mr. Nagy Ritz.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you again. So before you, the report as of February 17th. Again, you hear me all the time saying the same thing. Every day things change. We're progressing. We're good. We're in good shape. Let's start from the start. We got JGM coming in pretty soon. There is a barge. JGM is doing the outfall construction. By the way, before I start saying this, thank you all for coming to the site, by the way. That was awesome. I was really pleased to have you all there. And it did make a big impact on the morale of the crew working on site as well. They liked it. Yeah, so shows the interest of the community, of course, and the high political end of it. So that's awesome. Thank you.
I'm sure you've got 14 thumbs up from this council.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the tour. So, sorry, back to the report. JGM is the subcontractor to Graham to install the outfall. They actually showed up. There is a barge on site now. Not sure if it belongs to them, but I do know that it has to do with that. There's also, so this is the contract value of $3,285,800. We have had a cash allowance for $3 million, so we had to issue a change order, excuse me, for $298 that you see on the second bullet. So adjusted is still a credit, and the contract price was 61. Now it is at 60.9. So we're getting back slowly to the original contract price. Having said that, there is one little sentence all by itself under construction costs for linear work. It says other change orders are in review. That is applicable to both the linear and the treatment plant. I'm just saying that things are coming on hot and heavy. So we are dealing with it. There's changes on site. So hopefully it will not be huge costs, additional costs, but there will be some. The linear work is still ongoing, as you have seen on site. I am pleased to announce that the Wildwood linear is completed. We are now approaching the bridge, and we're coordinating with the bridge. You'll see a note there that we're still in coordination with the ministry. The price has not changed there either, but I did make a note here in the report before you about rocks that we have encountered, and there is a unit contract rate in there, so we will deal with that as it comes. The construction cost for the administration that's associated with engineering, there is some adjustment for accounting, and what I mean by that is that when we cross-check all our numbers that we submit before you with our finance department before we submit, and there's $2,000, well, almost $3,000 that were not lining up with us, and we found out that there is some adjustment based on POs that were issued that got closed after we wrote the report or before we wrote the report. There is, that's what I meant by that. So it's not huge, but it does now line us up. So adjusted contract price, you can see that at 4,911,012. That is the exact number that the finance department has as well as of the date of the report. So we are in good shape there. The additional construction services, the $3,819,942, those include, as you can see on which page, it does include the, on the second page, there is a note where it says total construction includes the CMC full contract price of $2,000,000.178. So if you take that $2 million out of the $3,000,000.8, it would leave you about 1.1 roughly. 1 million of that is costs that we incurred, as you are aware of. For instance, I'm just top of my head, we got about $500,000 that we paid for one of the innovation equipment that we had to pay before we innovated to the contractor. We bought the pipes for, you remember the pipes that we bought for 174, the HDB, the outfall contract, the secondary clarifier, down payment, the HDP pipe was 341, the clear and grubbing, project management fees for Colliers, that's the other consultant that oversees the payment to Associated. When you add those up, it's about 1.1 million. It's not about, it's exactly that. So, any hidden surprises? There will be some change orders for sure. There will cost increase, yes. And I don't know the magnitude yet, and you will be the first to know as soon as we find out. What else? The archaeological is progressing. We have come up with a plan. Wellington conveyance is high interest archaeological zone, all of it. So Wellington Avenue right now is being investigated with the archaeological consultant. Almost every meter, every 5 meters, we're digging holes in their presence, with also presence of a member of the First Nation of Climate Nation, to make sure that the site is clear for us to install the pipe. It's an open cut. It's so we're digging for this pipe. Half the road will be opened. We cannot tunnel this one. So we're going to be digging, as you probably know, from Courtney all the way to Alberni, Abbotsford, so coming out to Marine, and then also on Marine all the way to the campsite, and then from there we're going to start tunneling. On that note, they are moving the tunneling machine that you all saw on site in Wellington, on Wildwood. They're moving that to the campsite tomorrow. So as of tomorrow, you'll start seeing equipment going into the campsite. We have notified the public, I should say the communication officer, and it's up to him now to notify the public. They have been notified previously that the trail is closed, but now we're going to be actually barricading certain areas of the campsite and the head of the trail at the campsite. The drilling itself, probably, where are we, Tuesday, so probably next week. They're going to start from the campsite end. It's going to be this is the most challenging part actually. It is tight and it's deep. You will also notice very quickly that coming up soon is the welding, the seam welding of the pipe that is going into that drilling. It's going to be laid on the ground from the laydown area at the old arena site, we used to call it, on Wellington, all the way down the trail right on the beach, all the way to the playgrounds where the papaya and all that. It's going to be right there. Then when they're ready to drill, they're going to pull it from the other end and get it to the hole. It's the only place where we could lay the pipe straight and weld it. The welding machine itself is going to be in the laydown area. You can drive by, you'll see the white tent that you've seen in Wildwood. It's sitting there now in on Wellington. BC Fair is on board. Courtney has been cleared archaeologically, so we can do that. It's again open cut, cut and cover, we call it. So Courtney Street from Willingdon down to the boat ramp is clear. The bridge, I'm pausing. There are changes in the design of the bridge. Things are tighter than we thought. So we're revisiting this. The section, I'm talking about the exact section that's going to get hung on the bridge, suspended. There are some issues there. We all met, we know what we're doing, and hopefully we'll come up with a conclusion really quick. No delays, and hopefully the cost will not be increased by a significant magnitude. And I think I covered it. If please do ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, questions?
Yeah, I have my number up.
Mayor Formosa first, and
I
then
think you'll find it written there somewhere. Thank you very much, Mr. Risk. I know our risks are a lot less when we have a risk on the file. Number one, if we find ourselves in significant issue, and where we were most vulnerable was, I think, on the lineal laying of the pipe, because of a number of components and issues were bid some time ago before things went even crazier. We had contract bids, right? And but some areas we were exposed to these days, these COVID days that are hurting. So luckily we had some bids and bought equipments and helped us out. But I remember at one time you told me and you were thinking out loud, and I know you don't like it when I do this because that's all you were doing, and maybe I'm taking advantage. But if worse came to worse, we could go with one tank for now and save funds. Just talk about that, and if it's anywhere in your mind, and if so, you can say, no, it's not an option, it ain't going to happen, and you don't have to say anything. Or I do know that at one point you were prepared, and that was when the big bid, we went to the big bid, the big one. And we knew that our predecessors across the way lost their facility because it came in at double or something across the water. And we were worried, but our big bid came in affordable. So that's my first question. And then my second question will be the route from the campsite to the facility. What is it exactly? And then my third question is, at intersections throughout the community, at streets where there's parcels of land yet to be developed, large parcels mostly, and I can think of 3 or 4 or 5 of them in the community, when you're putting your pipe along the main road, are you putting T's in there so that if these folks want to develop, they can come in without having to disrupt it and pay extra and disrupt the road and dig it all up? Thank you. Those are my 3 questions. Tanks, route from the campsite, and T's at road intersections. Thank you. Where sewer does not exist today in the city.
If I may, Mr. Chair. The tanks. The operation of the treatment plant, the treatment plant currently, at the current volume, can operate with one, what we call train. So half of the designed facility right now is adequate to fully operate to service the community. Half of what we designed. So, if you remember, we had 4 circular tanks and 4 square tanks, and we had 2 empty square tanks at the end. Half of that, so that we call that one train, and half of the screens at the entrance are adequate to fully operate to standards with the current flows. So we need 2 tanks out of 4, and we'll be fully operational. If we get only 1 tank, which I don't think it is the case anymore, because that was last time we talked. Now we have better news that all is on schedule, and it should be a tank. Second tank is, where are we? Should be here today, actually, 28. So, yeah, second tank should be in the community. So we're good, in good shape this way. Having said that, there are equipment that comes into those clarifiers that we're still working on. Pumps, that kind of stuff.
You may build, you may not at this time.
Yes.
Okay,
This time,
got it.
we don't know what's the status, so I don't want to commit.
Yeah.
But definitely COVID is affecting us, as you always heard me saying that. So luckily, I can think of 2 other communities that are really, really struggling. Knock on wood, we're not. We have excellent teams on board, and I commend you for approving, allowing us to do the pre-purchase, all the innovation equipment. That saved us a lot of headaches. Yes. So I hope that answers the first question.
Yes, very, very well, thank you.
The second question is the trail, if I may, is the alignment. So literally, we are following the trail from the campsite to the Hall Road, across the Hall Road, into the treatment plant.
So along the beach trail, for sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the map is on site, on the website. The map of where the pipe is going is on the website. So if I may, not to confuse anybody, the pipe that I spoke about that is sitting on the beach, this is just for laid it out, like you've seen in Wildwood. We lay them along the shoulder of the road, but we don't have room here in the campsite to lay it anywhere else. It's gonna go on the trail. So campsite 18, 19, that's the top washrooms, right off that.
Yeah, so my confusion there is that it wasn't right along, for the first half along the beach trail itself, it goes up and over, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Just because I don't know what is the beach trail, the definition of beach trail, that's why I'm looking to our director here, so. Thank you.
If I may. So the pipeline will come along Willingdon Avenue at the chopping block. It'll take a right up Abbotsford, Alberni, and then go along Marine Avenue on the western side of the roadway. It'll continue along that shoulder until we cross over the streams, the McGuffey and McFall Creeks. It goes a little bit beyond that, and then it starts making its way into the upper campground.
Right.
Okay, so that section, that's where the drill rig will be, is up in that upper section. They'll drill back to the highway as well as drill towards the trail in that section. Okay, so that's where the main pipeline will go. When Nagy talked about initially when they fuse the pipe together, because remember they're in whatever 40-foot sections, they have their fusing machine, they need a place to lay out that pipeline. So it'll go from their Graham's marshalling area where the old arena site was, and it'll go down along that roadway, rampway, and essentially that pipe will be along the high water mark along that while they fuse until they're ready to drill that section and pull that pipe back through. So they'll reposition the pipe, getting it ready for when they have to do the installation.
Right.
So hopefully that clears it
Thanks.
up.
Yeah, because it moved, like that's what we saw on our tour, that it moved up the hill instead of actually on the trail for the first part, which I think will make a lot of people happy because a lot of people use that.
Where does it enter the
So, it's probably, I don't know the distance, about 100 meters north of, once you get into the trail section, just past those washrooms, the lower washrooms. It's probably about 100 meters, yes. And then, yeah, so that's where they'll pick up that end. So hence the need to close the trail starting, actually barricading the trail starting tomorrow, because there will be crews on the trail accessing it from, to position their equipment. Okay?
That answer all your questions, Mayor Formosa?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, and then the last one is the whys at the intersections.
Yes.
That we're ready for.
Well, yes and no. So the yes part is that hydraulically, the capacity is there. The no part is not all the land that is available to be developed in the future has a T in front of it. because of that hydraulic line, grade line. So when you're running the pipe, we're running it a certain pressure. To tee in, you have to be able to pump into that main at a higher pressure. Otherwise, it'll back up on you, right? And we don't know that.
But if there's a T and it's capped,
Right.
then whoever wants to come doesn't have to dig up the road.
We have in certain places where we know that we have flow coming in that will exceed the hydraulic grade line, and so we teed it at those places.
We know where people have existing services,
It's
basically, that are not on the system, but will probably be joining the system at some point. I guess that's kind of what my question is. Like, for instance, Powell Place, right there.
I'm getting there.
Powell Place, for instance.
I may, Mr. Chair. Without mentioning locations, because it's, no, I mean, there's no secrets. It's just I have to be exact when I mention those T locations. But for instance, one I know of that I can remember, like I can describe clearly. At Chilco, there is a lift station there that pumps up to the treatment, to the lagoons, the treatment plant, right? We've looked at the head at the pump station and the head in the pipe, and we figured that we can actually come across the street from that pump station to the pipe under gravity. So we can eliminate pumping from Chilco all the way to the lagoon and then back down, right? So we put a T in there, and we're gonna go across the street, across the highway. That's one location. We also put a T that will grab all the flows that are potentially available or become available at Powell Place. That's another T I'm aware of. The complex, there is another T that I'm aware of.
So it's being considered where possible, that's the question. So,
Yes,
thank you.
but I cannot name all the
Yeah,
places.
right,
That's all I'm saying.
right. Thank
Then
you.
we also have the ability to insert Ts in various locations in the future.
Oh, good.
Okay, very good. Moving along on our speaking agenda, we have Councillor Elliott and then Councillor Dowd.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nagy Ritz. Risk.
Just
Risk.
taking a risk.
Yeah, like the mayor was saying, lowers the risk.
Where's the risk? We need risk on the file.
I just wanted to make sure I understood all these numbers a little bit here. So the construction costs to date include everything you know about. There are some outstanding change orders that are under review at this time, and those all add up to $87,945,577.79. And the total access to funding is 8901, 10,800. So our wiggle room's down to about $1 million at this point. Is that right?
87.9 minus 89, that's about right. 1.1.
Yeah.
That's correct. Sorry, Mr. Chair. if I-
Okay. So I just wanted to understand that. So, and then we have this unfunded section of Artaban you're talking about. Is that a significant factor that, because clearly that number is bigger than the 1 million that we have for wiggle room right now? That was deferred, you said. So is that deferral staying deferred until we figure out what our total numbers are, and then we have to address that separately at some time?
If I may, Mr. Chair, yes, that's an easy way to answer. Yes.
Okay. So I understand perfectly then.
I knew you did.
All right, I just wanted to make sure. And I also wanted to say the tour was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dowd?
No, I'm going to echo that. The tour was great. You know, it really gave me an understanding. You see drawings and pictures and plans that it's never the same as going and being on the ground and walking through the buildings and seeing the construction going on and the size of the project. So it was impressive, and I think others on the tour appreciated it very much as well. It was nice to hear that the people that are down there working enjoyed showing what they're doing, because they are doing some amazing things down there that haven't been seen here before. And another thing that's not seen too often is the monthly reports we're getting from you guys to council about the details of the project. It doesn't happen everywhere. I know it's a lot of work, and I appreciate the fact that it happens. And my questions have mostly been answered in your dialogue there about the reports. When I was coming here, I saw some construction starting to go on Alberni about a block up from Marine Avenue, and I just wondered if you could explain what's going on down Alberni Street. What's that part of the project?
Through the chair. That ties in actually to what the mayor just asked. So the T that we were talking about, that's another T that I could have easily mentioned. So Alberni right now, what you see is just investigative work for the existing utilities. So Graham is very diligent on locating and surveying every single service under the road in the alignment, in the course of the alignment. So they expose every single service, they shoot it and mark it on a map and make sure that when either open cut or tunneling, it does not interfere, it's not in conflict with the pipe. That's what you see on Alberni right now. So back to the T, we are teeing off at this junction, at the intersection of Alberni Marine and Wellington, to grab the flows coming in from Alberni in certain area of Alberni, above, just up to the apartments, I believe. That section right now is draining towards Westview. So we're going to intercept it and take it, instead of letting it go towards the treatment plant, into the pump station and then pump it back towards Alberni. We can intercept because we have that hydraulic grade that I was talking about. We can do that. So that is part of the original design. We're just investigating the site itself to make sure that we're not in conflict with existing utilities.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Not seeing any other hands. Mr. Risk, I've got a couple of questions for you. One, I talked to you this morning about the trail being shut down for walkers, and I think I asked previously we're going to put some type of notice out to that effect for the public. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The email went out to our Director of Communications this morning.
And Mr. Bertig, in terms of that communication and when we're referring to the Millennial Trail, can we also add in the Seawalk and how that timeline on reconstruction is progressing, or is it already done?
Not all. The resurfacing has, some of it has been done. Some of the rock work on the seawalk has not been completed. We're still gathering some costing information from some contractors.
So with the Millennium Trail being shut down, will people still be able to access the Seawalk?
The seawalk will definitely still be open, yes. And then all the other trails in the upper Millennium, it's only that lower section that will be closed.
So if we could,
while the construction takes place.
So when we're notifying the public, if we could make that statement to help them out on the areas to walk. Yes, Mayor Formosa.
How long are you anticipating to close down the Seawalk or the beach trail?
Right now, it's scheduled to the end of June. So from tomorrow to the end of June, hopefully that timeline, depending on how construction goes, we can shorten that timeline, but that's what they're anticipating that they'll require till the end of June.
4 months.
Yeah, that's why we need the notice. And secondly, you had mentioned supplies, logistics, whether we're going to get all the materials we need. There was some timeline around what we needed to put concrete together. How's that been progressing? You know, the day before notice kind of thing. Has that been working out?
We're in good shape.
We're in good shape?
We're in good shape. We're in good hands with the consultant and the contractors taking care of this project. We're in good shape.
Excellent.
Suppliers are doing their best. Nobody wants to delay anything, but things happen, as you
Great. So thirdly, Wellington Road, the cuts that have been being made along there, will we have to close the road while that open ditch is being done?
Half lane will be closed, will be cut open. So
there will be one lane still running?
The other half, we hope it's still running. If not, we'll make sure that the section that is totally closed, we still have access either for emergency or to the residential areas along the beach.
Okay, excellent. And I don't like to ask this last question, but I've got to. The archaeological cuts that we've been making and being overseen every day, have we found anything to any significant degree at this point?
There's nothing wrong with asking that question. I mean, I ask that question all the time. No, so far, so good. As in, it's good either way, but so far, no. The answer is we have not found anything of any significance. If there is anything else, we have a plan B. But Courtney has been cleared completely in its entirety. Some sections of Willingdon. I believe actually we are Marine Avenue has also have seen same type of investigation you'll see in front of the beach hut.
Right.
Some squares open there and covered with crush. Yeah.
Yeah, we can see all of those cuts. Mayor Formosa?
Yeah, while you're thinking of Wellington, maybe a consideration when you were down to half a road is just have it one way until you're done. So that way the residents can always get at it, and you got two-way up above. So I don't know, just a thought.
We do have a traffic management plan. Sorry, Mr. Chair. We do have a traffic management plan, and definitely that is in the consideration.
And just, yeah, go ahead, Tor.
Yeah, just on that note, if I might add, we definitely working with the contractor. One of the issues that may come up is dependent on the archaeological review that's required, because then the material has to be cast in place, and they have to go through all the material through and sift it. So it'll be dependent on how much room we have to have traffic to go around in those sections. So we're very cognizant of that issue, and hopefully we can keep it open for all those residents 100% of the time, but we are going to have some areas where it's going to impact traffic flow.
Yeah. So my last comment is not really a question, but I just want to say how much I enjoyed the tour, and seeing the people from Graham Construction at work on that site was very impressive. Looks like a great company, and I understand that you're very happy with their progress, so that's all good. And one thing that the assistant superintendent, when we were walking the site, said to me, we've hired many locals, number that were laid off at the mill and whatnot, and I asked him, is there room for any more? And his response was, yes, we will be needing a few more down the road. I sent one of our locals that had been laid off from a tugboat and working at the mill, and he was met, and they are getting back to him in March when they require his services. So I was very happy to hear that. Thank you very much. All good.
If I may, on that note, please do, if you do know anyone that is looking for work in this field of line of work, please recommend them to contact the contractor. The contractor on site is always looking for people. It's just a matter of timing.
Just keep in mind that the disciplines that are working on the site are ever changing, right? Like we've had, the steel crew, the concrete crew, pretty soon it's going to be the mechanical, the electrical. So there's changes in the disciplines that come through there.
Right.
But the time of your tour, there was about 100 people on that site. So
yeah,
it tells you the enormity of it.
Yeah, excellent. Not seeing any other hands in here. Thank you very much, gentlemen, unless you have something else you would like to add.
No, it's always a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to answer your questions. And if you wish at any time to revisit for whatever reason, please let us know, and we'll be glad to take you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving along, we move now to 5.5, the quarterly 2021-22 strategic plan update for March 2022.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council. And this is really just an opportunity to check in again, provide a quarterly update, and give you a chance to provide or ask any questions you might have. And by extension, the community as well. I welcome any phone calls. If folks happen to be looking at this, please do reach out and ask questions. So there's I was going to spend 1 or 2 minutes going through all 85 action items on here, if you're good for a couple hours yet. Just kidding, I won't do that.
We'll give you a couple minutes.
So really just again, the strat plan and the strat plan summary are attached as Appendix A and B. Appendix C is the strategic plan work plan with all 85 action items kind of updated as of February 18th. Appendix D is the council and committee follow-up action list, and you'll note it's down to 2 pages. It's not because there's not a lot of actions going on, but I've been moving them into the strat plan work plan where it makes sense. And any items that have been done and resolved in the 3 months since the last update are not kept on that list either. And then the other thing I started including with the last one was an update on various grant applications, the status. Ones we're still waiting on, ones we've received, and ones that perhaps we weren't successful in. That's Appendix E. So I'm just going to leave it at that without going through all the details of all of these, but if there are questions, I would welcome them.
Yes, Councillor Hathaway, you have a question?
Thank you. Not really a question. This is a huge, great report and bringing us up to date. And I would like to, at some point down the road, commit more time to it and to go through the list and ourselves. I mean, you kind of go through it, but I think as a group, and is there anything we want to change? And maybe it will require like a workshop sort of session or something, but there's so much work that's gone into this and keeping it up to date and everything, and I hate to limit the presentation to 2 minutes. It just doesn't feel like enough, but thank you for your report. It's excellent.
No, I concur with your comments, Councillor Hathaway. A session for council to go through this would be a good idea. Councillor Leishman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you so much, CAO Brewer. It's a really valuable tool to have. It's really appreciated and shows just how much is going on. Like, if anybody ever forgets or doesn't fully understand the scope of actions that are happening or that are in different stages of happening, this is a really great thing to refer people to, and it just leads me to think that, I mean, at some point, I think we're going to need to have a conversation about a bit more capacity for some of the bigger projects that are, kind of we're getting into now in terms of intergovernmental relationships and reconciliation and a potentially of like strategic initiatives like a public energy, exploring something like that. I think there's a lot of seems like the better staff does and management does on what they're doing, the more things seem to get thrown. So I'd appreciate like a sort of an honest discussion on whether there's need of certain other positions in the staff level.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Leishman. Any further comments? Councillor Southcott.
Yeah, I can't help but add my admiration and appreciation for this report, and just a comment that I find myself, and I have found myself in recent months, more often than ever before, explaining to people how our plans and our bylaws, particularly how this one is an overarching vision that then informs our official community plan, and that branches out into the zoning bylaw. And people are fascinated to know how these things work. The people that I discuss with, but I reflect that, in years past, I don't know how much I actually referred to this plan. I definitely did the other ones because they were more operational, but to have this high overview that's a part of our working mechanism just inspires me to believe that we can handle so much because we have this level of vision now. I feel proud and I feel optimistic. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor from, or Councillor Elliott, and then Mayor Formosa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Russell Brewer. I think Councillor Hathaway is quite correct that it would be nice to set up a session that was maybe an hour dedicated just to this. it's hard to be hungry and tired and put it into a meeting with the general other stuff. And it is fairly strategic, and since we created our strategic plan, we've gone through a pandemic. We're coming into an election year, and it would be really great to review, what's been done, where we're at, and maybe create some recommendations for the next council as a result of our experiences with this particular strategic plan and all the work we've accomplished. And I think it deserves a little bit of time, and maybe we might want to make the recommendation that staff set up some time for us to do that in the next couple of months, maybe. It's my thought on that.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Mayor Formosa.
Thank you. While it's fresh in our mind to Councillor Elliott, this is a plan and recommendation to the next council. It's right here, in my view. But there's nothing wrong with looking at it again and studying it. And basically, the beauty of it, it's small. It's not this thick. It's readable. It's understandable. It's action-orientated, and it's practical. And it's basically very, very easy to read, and it's detailed. This is where you have your poop together, right here. This is your plan, and this is it. And again, it's readable, understandable, action-orientated, and it makes sense. It's ready for the next council. There's our plan. What we've done, what we haven't yet to do, what we want to do, some things that maybe have to come off or on, but you got 7 months left. We're very busy, but I'm proud of it. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Formosa. Lose my voice here. So, yes, CAO Brewer, I think we're all in agreement. We need to spend a little more time with this document and all your fine work, and so that we can all digest it fully. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd welcome the opportunity to do that. Clearly, there's a number of items we're working on. This is your strategic plan.
This is our work.
That's right. And staff does a heck of a lot of work that's not necessarily reflected in this. You'll see that noted sometimes in some of the planning reports. There's probably 80% of the work is just operational day-to-day work required just to maintain all the services we provide, right? So that's something I always like to highlight, that there isn't room at this point to bring in significant initiatives. We just don't have the freeboard right now with the resources we have, the capacity we've got. But I would absolutely welcome an opportunity to go through it for an hour with you, highlight some things that I think maybe you could make a recommendation to the next council that could be reflected in a strat plan, or items that could drop off as in terms of priority. And obviously there's been discussion even today about some initiatives that you might want to consider that are not reflected necessarily in this plan.
Excellent. Councillor Doubt?
Yeah, and I like the idea of getting together and having a workshop to go through this in more detail and really take a couple of hours to talk it over and to maybe review it. It's a strategic plan that we agreed to as a council shortly after we were elected. We've got, I think, about 7 months more to do things that are in the strategic plan, and we may make suggestions for the next council, but there's an election between now and then. There might be a lot of new faces sitting around the council table at the end of that, and I'm sure that new council will get together and look at the existing plans and see what they can agree on as a target amongst themselves. So I like the idea of a workshop, maybe some recommendations to the next council, but the plan from 2022 on to 2026 is going to be in maybe different hands than it is today.
Thank you, Councillor Doubt. And we hear you, Councillor or CAO Brewer, when you say we may want to look at it. We don't have the capacity to add, but we may want to drop a few items. We hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we now move to community engagement report, councillors, and I would like to suggest that we limit it to 1, 2, or 3 of your top items. We don't want to be here all night, so we'll start with Councillor Leishman on our screen and give
Thank you,
you
Chair.
the floor.
I'll keep it brief. Just lots of emails on many of the topics, some that we've dealt with. That never ends. But I did attend an interesting webinar on hydrogen, on the differences between all the different types of hydrogen production, because I just really wanted to wrap my head around the different types of hydrogen, and that was very interesting and probably raised more questions than I had before. And I also attended another session on municipal district energy projects and opportunities for local governments. So, and that was prior to sort of anything else happening. So that was interesting, and I think there's a lot of opportunities there as well. But I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Southcott.
Going to be very abbreviated here, but I have been over the past few meetings as well, so I've got 4 things to let us know about. One is municipal natural assets. There's a bunch of new interest going on in that. I attended a webinar today sponsored by the BC Environment Ministry, Municipal Natural Assets Initiative and Coastal Douglas for Conservation Partnership. It was very informative. They're working very hard to develop useful tools. Obviously, MNAI has been involved in this since Gibson's, like years ago. We've heard about that. The Clean BC Roadmap to 2030, which the Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Committee is working on, has natural asset infrastructure intentions also from the province. That's another prong that the committee is going to probably bring as a recommendation. The Climate Caucus, which is an organization that's been around for a while, specifically targeting climate, has been working through a SFU grad research study. I've been involved in meetings advising to that from a council standpoint. QRD Director Andrew Fall has also been involved in that. What they're doing is amassing approaches from different angles. So the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative is very specific, but it's expensive. It's effective. This is becoming much more of a focus because of environmental and climate-related calamity going on all over the place. So we're going to see tools come to us, hopefully in the near future, from these various different directions are working all in the same direction. So something's looming. The Climate Caucus report will be out in another couple of months. I attended the CAT team. It's really amazing that now there's work, just put it very briefly, in the direction of safe supply. This has been talked about a lot, but my contact with that goes way back to the 90s when I was working as a paramedic in the downtown east side and was part of a kind of a focus group connected to the province. And they were thinking of sending people to Germany to see the successes they were having with exactly that kind of program back then. And so hopefully now we're going to see something based on experience internationally to help with this crisis that's been going on for years now in BC. Also just want to mention that the transition at BC Ambulance is still going on from casual to full-time staffing of their ambulances, generally from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. They've got 2 fully staffed ambulances on. During the other 12 hours, it's touch and go. They've got 1 for sure full staff during that other 12 hours. But what's happened is because of taking those casuals and pulling them into full-time positions, you can squeeze an awful lot more work out of casuals and commitment, and now this transition is taking a long time. So that has an impact to us because the fire department is needing to fill in when ambulances can't get there. And I had a meeting with the chief yesterday. He said just last week there were 4 calls that came in all at the same time. Amazingly, they were able to upstaff 2 other ambulances, and this was before that 10 a.m. It was in the morning. So still there's a lot of commitment from the staff that are available. They're trying to hire more people, but the people just aren't there. So they're bringing in what's called EMRs, which are basically an occupational first aid sort of level of training. And these people will be able to drive, and you got to take what you can get. I also want to mention that farming is a bit on the move. The Powell River Farmers Ag Institute has a new president, Julie Joby, and board chair. And I had a meeting with recently with a business colleague of mine and very respected local farmer, Aaron Mazurek, who is intending, and I said I was going to mention this today. He said that's fine. He's intending as spring, as we get later in the spring, to invite our council and regional board members to come out and have a look at his farm. He has shares in the Blueberry Commons that I still have shares in as well. And the question will be, what can local government do to help advance local farming and food security? So I think that we're going to see a new opportunity, new initiative there. So thank you for hearing me out on all this, but these are critical things that I think make a big difference to our community. Thank you.
Thank you for making a difference, Councillor Southcott. Councillor Hathaway.
Thank you. Yeah, I attended some of the usual things, the joint working group, C3, and also the community action team meeting, which was yesterday, and it was very well attended. I'm just going to expand on one little part. There's a fellow by the name of Dr. Jeff Bardwell, and he's doing research into overdose in rural communities, and he chose Powell River to do his research. I don't know if there's other communities or not, but certainly Powell River is one of them. And I think we'll benefit from his findings. He spoke a little bit on the benefits of legalization, and he referred to the Portugal experience, which is where they've legalized drugs. There was a little bit of a discussion on the high cost of drugs in rural areas compared to urban areas. It's just harder to get it here. This was part of the discussion around legalizing it. So this lends itself to higher crime because it costs you more to get your drugs, so you steal more stuff, which is totally a downside. So legalization, his point was legalization could act, or maybe it was somebody else that said it, I don't think it was him, but that as a crime reduction strategy. So that's another point that I hadn't really heard before, but it's the obvious. And so anyways, very interesting. I'm anxious to see his report when it comes out. And just on another note, the overdose prevention site is currently averaging around 250 visits per month. So we're saving lives there. And whether people agree or disagree, we're saving lives. And that's the important thing for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dowd?
Yeah, I went to the C3. It was, I think it was a short agenda this time, but we certainly got the ball rolling, or the mayor got the ball rolling on talking with the Tla'amin, the regional district, and the city on the shared future for electrical generation in the area, and that has some promising hopes, and we'll see how that goes in the future. I went for a little walk on Saturday morning around the intersection of Joyce and Alberni with about 75 or 100 other people carrying signs supporting nurses and healthcare workers and grocery store workers and others getting through the pandemic, and I was there for about an hour and a half, met lots of nice people, and we got considerable support from the people driving by while we were being careful not to get in the way of traffic. So that was my Saturday morning, and I enjoyed it. I'll keep it short.
Thank you very much. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I've been pretty busy, actually. So our local therapeutic riding association, I'm on the board there, and they've been unable to do classes for the last little while due to injury of the instructor, and the instructor managed to get her surgery on her knee, and we're optimistic, depending on recovery, that we may be able to, with hiring another helper, perhaps get a spring session in for the folks who haven't had their therapeutic riding since we've been closed down, so that was positive. I did attend the CAT, and I also was very interested in Dr. Jeff Bardwell's presentation. A couple of the points that hit home for me was he indicated that the top 10 hardest hit communities per capita are all rural, and Powell River is within that top 10. There is a complete lack of research on rural issues such as this. The bulk of all research is done in urban areas. His studies are unfunded at this point, so he kind of is doing them off the side of his desk. He recommends we get some grant funding to try and, based on the rationale that the top 10 communities hit in this province are rural, and there is a lack of research. And he has ideas on how he could expand his research here in Powell River and do it more justice. And he likes Powell River as a test case because it is very unique in a lot of ways. And so he would be willing to do more research in our community if we could get some grants to fund that kind of research. And I thought that was interesting and good. The type of research he did do was not really statistical. It was more around qualitative research, which means it's interview-based. It has, it reveals a lot, but it has some limitations as well. So that was all very interesting. The Powell River Arts Council has changed its name, and they've elected their new board. They had their AGM, and their new name is Cathette Arts Council. It was unanimous by the board to do that. It was part of their AGM voting, so they're now the Cathette Arts Council. I've been working with the joint potential name change group, and I did some working group on that one a little off the side as well, and we've obviously moved things forward because we've announced the opening of our website and we're launching our engagement, so we were successful in having that move forward. I went to the SAPAC Accessibility Subcommittee, and we had some discussions and recommendations which were tabled at the 3C meeting as part of the short agenda, and C3, sorry, not 3C. And I also attended the C3 meeting where that was reported out on. I also individually did help a number of folks in the community and talk about and provide some discussion with people doing their appeals process for the BC assessment. And BC assessment is out scheduling and having phone calls with the folks who did file their appeals, and that's underway right now, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that turns out. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Elliott. And Mayor Formosa.
Yeah, I'll try going real quick here. So meetings with various councillors as of late with various issues that they wanted to discuss and get together upon. Working and assisting with requests from various serious corps, looking at the mill site and putting groups together and trying to manage that. We had a C3, we had a possible name-changing committee meeting, and that was also attended by Councillors Elliott and Councillors Hathaway. And I think I did mention this, the meeting with Minister Osborne, and a majority of the mayors all spoke up, and it was all simultaneous around the issues of supportive housing and affordable housing, but mostly the supportive housing issue, where she heard loud and clear that the mayors and the communities are done and more funding is required. And we heard about that today, I'm sure. Also, meeting with certain members of the supportive housing group and their needs and issues, and meeting with the regular various members of public on numerous concerns and issues that just seems to become more and more of. I don't know if it's COVID fatigue or what, but anyways, the telephone burns off 7 days a week, hours and hours. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mayor Formosa. I am sure your phone is ringing. So just quickly, a couple quick items. BC Ferries, quick update. COVID is having impacts on staffing and getting enough crew to run ships, so that is impacting both locally the run to Texada, and as has already been reported, reduced scheduling out of Langdale to Horseshoe Bay, which has affected the cutback of numerous runs on that capacity. So the bottom line is there, make sure you are checking websites and to get the latest information before you're traveling out of this community, because with the changes going on and the connections that are in play, you need to do your homework, or else you could find yourself in trouble and waiting for a ferry that's not coming. So having said that, I've been dealing with that ongoing for the last little while with numerous emails, and there's a scheduled advisory committee meeting with BC Ferries coming up in that regard. Sport Hall of Fame, working on that every day of the week. I get calls, I'm dealing with letters, I'm dealing with individuals that are working on various components on my committee. So there's a lot of work being done, and I'm happy to report everything's going well. So it's on schedule, on time, and on budget. There was one other item, but right now it's not on the top of my head, so we're going to move forward and move to the end of today's agenda. And if I can bring it up, I'm going to find that it is now question period. So, questions from the press? Mr. Galinsky?
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank the Manager of Engineering Services and Director of Infrastructure for sticking around. They had the courtesy of asking me if I had any questions. I nodded that I did, and they managed to stay through the meeting, so thank you very much. My first question is with regard to the Consolidated Wastewater Treatment Plant and the outfall specifically. I know that a contract has been awarded through Graham Infrastructure for, I think, $3.3 million or something to deal with that, but I'm wondering about the former contractor. I realize there's a suit and it can't be commented on, but I'm wondering if within the budget there's contingency for this particular occurrence.
And who would like to tackle that one?
I can speak to it. As outlined in the report, that original contract amount remains part of the overall budget as listed in there. So there's a line item. If you read through the report, you'll see the other construction costs includes the 2.1-ish that was for that original contract.
So that's not some funding that you're expecting to run into unexpectedly?
We've just retained the original amount of the PO for that original contract.
So it's in there?
It's in there.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, CAO. It was specified that all up we're looking at about $89 million. I'm wondering if that includes the $3.4 million in additional borrowing that is being sought by the city, or whether that is supplementary to the $89 million figure.
That additional borrowing room, if you will, is with the Inspector of Municipalities, so it's not included in that 89 at this point.
Thank you. Could the additional borrowing be used for the Artaban section? Has it been earmarked, or is it just contingency that's been put in place?
It's worth reading the report again, because it would be available should there be other contingencies, or it could be available for Artaban, for example, if there's no other cost escalations or contingencies that we would need the roughly 1 million difference between the 89 and 88 at this point. So theoretically, it could be available for Artaban. It's not earmarked for anything specifically at this point.
Okay, I guess you're waiting to see how costs play out, and you'll make a decision on that basis. That's great. The Manager of Engineering Services said that COVID problems are being faced, and there have been some supply issues as well, and I'm wondering if they're foreseeing any significant delays happening, or whether they're hoping that the project can be completed on schedule.
Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. At this point in time, we have extended the project completion by 1 month at no additional cost.
Those were my questions, Chair. I again thank the two gentlemen for sticking around to hear my questions out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalinsky. Much appreciated. And Roger, do you have any questions?
Chair. Chair, we saw for the first time the process for the name change process, however that's getting titled. I can't remember the exact pronunciation. Pardon me, sir? Possible name change, yes, indeed. Possible name change. And there is a lot of talk about fairness in that whole process. What I saw was a line item set up for a one-sided argument. I strongly urge the group maybe to think about putting in the benefits of so-called colonialism. And I say that as a person who's Métis in heritage. My dad was the first white guy since 1605 in my family, and my entire family tree just reads Indian, 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 all the way back to 1605, and that 1605 guy is buried in Fort Smith, so he actually paddled his way all the way across as an entrepreneur, voyager, you know, that sort of stuff. So, you know, it's not all beat the guy to death and steal his land sort of stuff. So I just wanted to ask if that could be brought into the process.
Thank you, Roger. Good observation. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Councillor Hathaway?
I think probably, Roger, if you submit your point of view through the process, that would be really helpful.
Right, well, yeah, okay, sure.
That would be the best route to go here. Like, we're not going to act on that comment, but through the process, it will or could get acted on. So that'd be the best thing to do. Thanks for that.
Thank you. And members of the public, questions? Not seeing any? Anything online? None? Okay, so who would like to move adjournment of tonight's meeting? Moved by Mayor Formosa, seconded by? Councillor Leishman. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned at 6:50 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Good meeting.